crazy athlete Han Sol is about to break another world record in a powerlifting competition in an attempt to take a weight of 10 tons. Having taken the right position and following the perfect technique of the deadlift, he pulled the bar off the floor with one powerful jerk, and his muscles swelled from the strain so much that they tore his clothes. But clothes aren't the only thing torn. It looked like the heart valve couldn't handle such a load, and Han Sol simply collapsed to the floor. "Athlete Han Sol!" was all the athlete could hear before losing consciousness. Thoughts flashed through the athlete's mind. Whatsoever, the doctor had already told him to be careful. I wonder if this would have happened if he had more muscle. Typical skill. Limitless muscle is built. But there shouldn't be too much muscle or girls will stop liking him. Rare skill created. Combat compression muscles. Style or muscle? The eternal question of the universe. And yet, there's no time to think. I need to get my protein as soon as possible. Unique skill. Falcon's eye has been obtained. Passive skill. Coolness received. The voice in my head keeps whispering something. You have satisfied the conditions and received and become a member of the legendary profession, bodybuilder. Opening his eyes, Han Sol saw the hens in front of him. He was just getting a bite to eat, except the size of these chickens is a little unusual. "Wait, what's that?" the athlete asked in surprise. The hero almost panicked, but the passive coolness skill worked, and he calmed down because the coolness skill was activated. When Han Sol looked around, he saw endless meadows and huge chickens. And if you think about it logically, it makes sense. He ate a lot of chicken breasts and went to hell when he died, so these chickens are attacking him. At one point, Han Sol gets angry and hits one of the chickens on the head. He's already pissed off that he doesn't have any protein with him. Even more so with these annoying half-birds. Skill activated. Falcon eye. The contents of the squirrel are measured. Coca object. Contains 68 kilograms of protein. Is that the voice of the fitness ancestors? Well, since this chicken is so high in protein, it means our hero will have a big breakfast today. He pounces on the wretched chickens and after a couple hours eats them huge carcasses, finally making up for the lack of protein. But that's not what's important to him right now. Since when are his arms so thin and his chest? It's flat. And he can reach his back, which hasn't happened since kindergarten. In a panic, Han Sol flies up to the lake, and as he looks at his reflection, he realizes with a scream that he has lost all of his muscles. Now he no longer cares where he ended up or why. His main goal is to stop being a wimp. He rips the tree out from the root in one powerful motion, then throws it on his back, and without delay begins to perform squats. Labor never betrays. Let's get to jumping. It's been 3 months. 3 months of continuous training. The only thing that kept Han Sol from having a nervous breakdown was composure. So much effort had gone into pumping, and still no muscle. Equanimity reminded him that he needed to do more work on himself. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind his back. This is the first time Han Sol sees such a huge rooster with a monstrous dragon tail. What is his even? Han Sol immediately started to run away from him, but the rooster was serious. He was literally stepping on the hero's toes. Han Sol realizes that if that monster hits him once, the athlete won't survive. But more dangerous than the rooster's attacks, it's his beautiful pecs that distract the hero from running. It makes Sol think, do wings develop pectoral muscles? Maybe he should build one. Of course he did. This idiot thought his muscles weren't growing because he was weak and focused on strength, but he completely forgot about stretching. And while he was running away from the rooster at full speed, the chickens he'd been eating for 3 months got in his way to finally get their revenge. As he scattered these fools from his path, he heard Hawkeye's voice. Subject is cockatrice. Protein content 12,000 kilograms. The object consists of pure protein. When consuming the breast of a cockatrice, you will gain a rare skill. Fantastic muscle recovery. And as soon as Han Sol realized what he needed, he immediately stopped and dodged the rooster's attack. Then he started jumping from tree to tree like a springer. A lot of people think that muscle growth comes from exercise, but in fact, when you're working out. In training, they just tear up and get weak, but then they recover and get much stronger, so he really needs that skill. As soon as cockatrice attacked the hero, he immediately bounced off the tree, dodging an incredible beak strike and lunged back at him with a counterattack. For the sake of the goal of rebuilding your muscles, you might as well risk your life. Han Sol has always dreamed of having sculpted muscles, and for that, he has been spending a lot of hours in the gym. Warning: energy beyond muscle compaction detected. Are you sure you want to cancel the muscle sealing skill? Yeah, no. I don't know what it is, but come on. Combat compression skill has been terminated. You have gone over the limit. The unique skill-changing frame has been obtained. At that moment, the hero's hand became simply huge. Taking proper aim, he struck right into the rooster's open beak and literally blew its head off in one blow. Warning: muscle structure is damaged. Muscle sealing skill reactivated. The hero's hand was back to normal, but he didn't care. The main thing is that he'll definitely eat the legendary breast today and have a fantastic muscle recovery. A little later in the night, he was already nibbling all the meat he had gotten, but at that time he didn't know what this place was or what lived here. And most importantly, the situation he was in. The natives who followed our hero were not bloodthirsty monsters, but just ravenous poor people who hadn't eaten meat in a long time. They don't understand if this man really defeated Cockatrice, and if it's true, isn't this man a monster? The natives decide to ask what happened after all. Seeing the locals, Han Sol inquired who they were. The local dwellers, without taking their eyes off the food, replied that their name was Gully and they were the local people. Suddenly the Hawkeye system activated. The system immediately analyzes the amount of protein in their bodies. But Han Sol tells the fitness ancestors that he's not going to eat people. Although, are they even human? It's the first time he's heard of the Ghoulie people. There's a ghoul here asking who killed Cockatrice. The hero replies that it was him, and the ghoulies are immediately happy about it. One of the guys explains that after the death of a powerful creature like Cockatrice, there's been a turf struggle, but Han Sol's only concern is how thin the guys' legs are. If you hit them, they'll break for sure. But all Han Sol cares about is how thin the guys' legs are. If you hit them, they'll definitely break. But the guys distract him from these thoughts and ask for help, because if he defeated such a powerful monster, he is surely a strong man. Han Sol asks them to repeat what they said, because he didn't listen to them. He was lost in his own thoughts. Ghoulies replies that they have already repeated 9 times. But the hero suddenly becomes serious and says that you need to do everything 10 times. Whether it is an approach to the legs or biceps, at least 10 reps. Otherwise, there is no way. Hearing this, the ghoulies realize that the guy is strange and hardly wants to help them. So the ghouls decide to remove themselves. And they're not at all offended. Han Sol informs them that the athlete needs to work out and won't have time to help at all. Han Sol sees the sad look on the poor people's faces and suggests they at least take the breast because he can't eat it all by himself. The ghouls thank the hero for the gift, and when one of them is about to take a huge piece of meat, Han Sol notices that this fool is about to tear his back off. Han Sol yells for Ghoul to stop and starts explaining that the guy is using the wrong technique for lifting weights, and if he uses the wrong technique, he could be crippled. Ghoul doesn't understand. Did he do something wrong? Why is the man yelling at him like that? But Han Sol is even more surprised. Don't the guys know how to pull weights? But this is the first time they've ever heard of it. Now Han Sol guesses why they are so skinny and weak. And as the 3 of them try to haul the meat away, the hero remembers his original high school coach. The coach used to say that you can only truly learn when you teach someone else. When you hit a dead end in your development, you have to take on a follower. And after looking at all these wretches, Han Sol thinks, maybe it's the right time. The hero snatches the meat from them with one hand and says they need to eat first, and then they will go to the village all together. And of course he needs to sleep, or his muscles won't recover. And already in the morning they visit the village of Guili, where the hero is met by the chief, whose name is Lord Ghoulie. He asks if there was any discomfort on the way here. Sol says it's fine, and looks at the chief's ugly body. It is obvious that he does not do sports, and most likely he also drinks alcohol and does not avoid fat. The chief orders his subjects to bring all the leftover rooster meat here. Han Sol remarks that this will take a long time, to which the chief just laughs. Does Han Sol really care about those useless ghouls? The hero really didn't like this phrase, so he decided to cut to the chase. The chief began to explain that since Han Sol had defeated the cockatrice, it was the beginning of a territorial separation. And the Quili are the weakest people. They have no skills, and they are not trained in martial arts. What other skills are there? Until now, the hero hadn't paid much attention to the weirdness around him, because he was busy building his muscles. The chief interrogates whether the hero who defeated the rooster really doesn't know what skills are, and when he gets an affirmative answer, orders the trio that found the man to be brought in. A moment later, they are led bound into the tent, and falling on their knees, the chief rises from his throne, and a huge club is brought to him. The ghouls will be punished for bringing in a bum who doesn't even know what skills are and doesn't want to become a subject of the Lord Guilis. Therefore, the guys who brought Han Sol to the village will die. At this moment, the chieftain swings his huge club and applies the waiting skill, delivering a powerful blow. Our hero stopped the club with one hand, and the ghouls survived. Not only did this chief distract him from his training, but he also likes to hurt the weak. The chief doesn't understand how this man stopped the club. No, he probably just misapplied the skill, or maybe his hand slipped, though who cares? Now the Lord will show the power of his skill, for the chieftain is able to increase weight by 2, 4, or 16 times depending on the amount of mana invested. Han Sol was shocked when he heard this. How much time could be saved by simply increasing the weight of the barbell? That's an amazing skill. The Lord's club weighs 32 kilograms, and the chieftain quadruples its weight, plus all this must be multiplied by the speed of his blow. With all his strength and his skill, the Lord makes a powerful strike, but the club just breaks against Han Sol's arm. The hero says that such a great skill is so amazing that it doesn't even want to make the chieftain his enemy. But the character of the Lord goes nowhere. Han Sol approaches the chieftain in a flash and grabs him by his keddy. Does the Lord think that, if he is stronger than others, he has the right to dispose of other people's lives? How much does Lord himself bench press in a triple set? Lord Ghouls doesn't know what this is. He asks, triple set? Is he suggesting we exchange 3 blows? At this moment, coolness is triggered and Han Sol's anger goes away. Han Sol says the basic exercises of a triple set include push-ups, barbell raises, and squats. Doesn't anyone know? From the looks on the goofballs' faces, they really don't understand anything. Well, then the battle for the title of strongest will begin with the deadlift. The chief reminds him that if he wins, Han Sol promises to be his subordinate. Han Sol appropriately reminds the Lord to keep his stance, or he risks hurting his back. The only thing Han Sol doesn't know yet is that the skill of the Lord of Guolis allows him not only to increase, but also to decrease his weight. He can easily lift a barbell weighing 200 kilograms. Well, it wasn't bad, but next time he should strain his legs. And before he approaches, Han Sol tells the crowd to watch carefully, because if he wins, the ghouls will have to do the same. After that, he begins to warm up, because in the deadlift not only the back is involved. If the hip joints are not properly relaxed, injury can occur. You must also keep your feet shoulder width apart and level under the bar. Then it is necessary to spread the chest, tense the muscles of the back, bark, abdomen, and buttocks, of course. All this is done with proper technique. Then, engaging the muscles of the lower leg and thighs, a vertical push is made. All this is done leaning on the feet. As soon as Han Sol is about to do the lift, the leader increases the weight of the barbell by 4 times, but that still doesn't stop the hero from pushing the barbell up like a fluff ball. The chief and his subordinates are very much surprised, and Han Sol anticipated and is upset by the fact that a new barbell will have to be made. The Lord and the entire tribe of ghouls recognize their new lord and beg him to take them under his command, and Han Sol agrees. After his defeat, the Lord of the Ghouls listened unconditionally to the hero, and as a result of his conversation with him, Han Sol learned that this world was different from his homeworld. There are legends of beings from other worlds who have returned back to their homes, But our hero doesn't have to think about such things until he's transformed into an athlete. The world Han Sol has fallen into is called Laisha, and it is ruled by the strongest, which is why the Lord gave up his title so easily. Han Sol suggests that to avoid confusion, the leader should now be called Old Lord. Then he goes to look at the training ground for the ghoul warriors. Han Sol expected it to be bad, but not this bad. The Old Lord doesn't even know what kind of training was conducted, for he is not versed in all of this. Han Sol decides that a good trainer can teach even without equipment. The hero orders the ghouls to form 5 lines. They do not understand why, but obey the order without question. Han Sol tells us that the ghouls are the weakest of creatures, content with the scraps of monsters. To fix that, the gooks need a strong body. Han Sol states that 3 months of hard training and will correct these deficiencies. With his speech, Han Sol raised the morale of the ghouls, who believed that they would no longer be looked down upon. Well, since everyone agrees, here's the new chief's first order. I want you to get into a push-up position. Shh. What's a push-up position? Realizing that it's useless to explain, Han Sol decides to show everything visually and says to just repeat after him. Everyone hesitantly assumes push-up poses, and the hero with fire in his eyes says, they will start with a warm-up in the form of 100 push-ups. After 3 hours, all the guys were exhausted and could barely lift their weak bodies, unlike Han Sol, who, with a stone on his back, kept pushing up incessantly. The Old Lord hinted to Han Sol that the ghouls were already exhausted. Great, replied the hero. So they should make the last 100, and we can have lunch. Hearing this, the guy's mood completely vanished. The guys have already done 700 reps, and the new Lord wants another 100? Even the Old Lord wasn't that cruel. I wonder if the Old Lord will agree to try to reclaim his seat again. Hearing the crowd's outrage, the hero threw off his weights and ordered everyone to stand up. The incredibly tired ghouls, who were no longer burning with their former enthusiasm, decided it was time for a snack. But Han Sol suddenly shouted, "Ghouls, you're considered weak. What else could be expected with such a mood? You are weaklings, who are willing to endure any humiliation. Do you want to remain as pathetic losers forever? When they kill your friends and your loved ones, what will you do? Run away like cowards? Those who answer yes can go away. I don't keep that kind of garbage. But for those who stay, I'll give them the muscle to protect what's most precious. The best coach is not the one who knows how to train properly, but the one who is able to inspire motivation and disciple who has given up. 1, 2, 3. Do push-ups like your life depends on it. Protect yourself, family. Father on the left hand, mother on the right. Catching such a powerful boost of motivation, the ghouls began to push up furiously, not feeling sorry for themselves. No one else dared to even think about fatigue. And at that moment, without realizing it, Han Sol had reached a new level of coaching abilities. Falcon Eye Skill, Level 1. Evolved Falcon Eye Level 2. 3 months have passed. A group of unknown fighters were approaching along the road leading to the ghouls' village. It was a squad of lizardsmen whose scouts had already reported all the details of the area. The lizard commander adopts the following plan of action. Without reconnaissance, just attack the village, because they are weak ghouls. This will be the humanoid camp. Forward to the attack, the commander commanded. The Old Lord warned Han Sol of the attack. Han Sol is ready to defend the village. He orders the ghouls to tense their muscles and retract their bellies. And as the lizards approach the village, the hero gives the command. Hit it! Huge rocks come crashing down on the attackers, killing almost all of the humanoid fighters. The squad leader wonders, who did it? What do you mean, who? Answers Han Sol. It's the ghouls, of course. The ghouls, who are no longer the weakest race. The lizard commander realizes that they are starting to lose. However, if the commander is able to summon the leader of the ghouls to fight, things will go differently. The Old Lord has a large amount of mana. So he's the leader of the ghouls, and the humanoid commander won't be able to defeat him in a fight. Tearing his clothes off, Lizard shouts that he's challenging Chief Ghoul to a fight, and offers to figure out the winner in a one-on-one battle. The old lord asks Han Solo if the chief will respond to the provocation, and the hero hesitates. As a child, Han Solo had raised an iguana. It was a rare underspecies of saltwater crocodile and would ask to play at every opportunity. The force of the bite of this subspecies exceeds the value of 2 tons, but even such strength pales in front of excellent muscles. When the iguana tried to bite the hero, it always broke its teeth. What was Han Solo doing with such a naughty pet? That's right. He remembered how he had tamed that lizard. Han Solo instantly leaps out of his seat and leaps at the lizard. In one easy motion, the hero slams it into the ground with such force that it begins to spit blood. Now we need to make eye contact. As a child, the hero learned that in order to tame an animal, you need to make it clear who is in charge, using psychological techniques. And by using these techniques, the hero intimidated the lizard commander so badly that the latter just gave up, and the battle between the 2 races was over. In this world exists the County of Verdo. Count Verdo is pleased with the talents of his warriors and commissions them to investigate the circumstances surrounding Cacatrix's disappearance. The warriors enthusiastically accept the task and leave. The Count asks his chief of guards if she is sure that such an important mission should be entrusted to new recruits. "Don't worry, Count. These are not just warriors, but brilliant warriors," was the reply. Riper, very skillful with the sword, thanks to which he controls his opponent during the fight. Hendart, on the other hand, specializes in a huge 2-handed sword. Although his sword is blunt, it is capable of chopping the enemy and his weapon apart. Together they are even capable of defeating the dragon, but why doesn't the general tell us anything about the 3rd warrior? The thing is, he's no different, even though he's trying hard. Then why is he on the squad? The answer is simple. They've been friends since childhood, so they go everywhere together. A squad of 3 warriors moves through the forest. A little later, the trio walking towards their goal is attacked by a goblin archer. Riper is instantly behind the goblin's back and stabs him with his sword. But a goblin manages to fire his bow, and the arrow flies right in front of the 3rd warrior's face, and the troop is attacked by goblins. Careful. There are hobgoblins among the goblins. The warriors warned each other. Hendart destroys one of the goblins with a single sword stroke. Friends say the security of the blog above all else. Blog is the name of the 3rd warrior. "Blog, we will protect you always," his friends proclaimed. "Thank you," shouts Blog, hiding from danger behind a shield and a tree. The battle is over with the victory of Verdo's warriors. After the fight, the friends immediately run to Blog and ask if he's okay, and apologize for letting one goblin through to him. A fight even breaks out between Riper and Hendart, over Hendart allowing the goblin into the Blog. Blog is tormented by doubts while the friends figure out why Blog happens to be a weakling. The friends have trained together, but Blog has no talent for martial arts. Training continues in the ghoul village. One of the trainees reports that he can no longer train. The ghoul wonders how this is possible. "Everyone start push-ups from the beginning," Han Solo commands. Turns out after defeating the lizards, the ghouls naturally began training them. And once the training session was over, Han Solo calmly let the lizardmen go and suggested that they could come in here whenever they wanted to train. But the lizards aren't likely to mess with these crazies again. So of course, the ghoul builders wish them good luck on the road. Han Solo is amazed at the appearance of the ghouls. They've become ghoul builders. Unloading is a necessary activity for a bodybuilder, because muscles break down during exercise and rebuild during rest. At the same time, if fatigue accumulates, the effectiveness of training falls and injury is possible. To avoid this, you need to rest. It's been 9 weeks since I started training. However, the effectiveness of the ghouls has greatly diminished. Then Han Solo thought that the ghoulies needed an unloading, and he gave 1 day of rest. But the next day, he saw that the ghouls had evolved in ghoul builders. Hawk Eye has been activated, and it shows that ghoul builders have a fat content of 8%. It looks like there's no need to unload, so the hero decides it's time for lunch. There was an offer from the athletes for a chance to hunt on their own. Han Solo thought they just wanted to avoid practicing. But that's not the point at all. It's just that they've never defeated the chickens on their own. All this time they've just been taking home the ones their new master defeated. But now with those gorgeous pecs, they can hunt for themselves. Well, if that's the case, then Sol doesn't mind at all, and the old lord casually lets out a phrase. Can the ghoul builders, if united, win? Defeat who? Han Sol asks. The old lord immediately started to justify that it was just a thought, he really didn't intend anything, and begging for forgiveness, he admitted that he was just wondering if the tribe united, if they could defeat Han Sol. But the hero, putting his hand on the lord's shoulder, said that an experienced athlete would never lose to a novice. After a couple of hours, the ghoul builders moved out to hunt, but in a somewhat original way. They did it by lunging forward. One of the hero's subordinates asked him to walk at a normal pace, but because he was distracted, he twisted his leg and immediately fell from unbearable pain. This was not surprising, for the joints of the ghouls had not been trained and they were still new to the sport. Han Sol simply tells the disciple not to exaggerate and to go on after resting. At the same time, Blog was practicing his sword skills and was tormented by the thought of his friends having to apologize for letting the goblin in. His weakness is to blame, for if he were stronger he would not be a burden to his comrades, so he trains even when the others are asleep. Suddenly his arm is supported by Riper's hand, who advises him on how to strike. Blog already thought he woke up his friend, but the latter claims that this is not the case at all. He had known for a long time that the comrade practiced at night in secret from everyone. Reaper gently stroked Blog's cheek, heard Hendart's voice wondering what his friends were doing here. Blog tries to explain that he was just practicing. Reaper told everyone to shut up and attacked Hendart himself, accusing Hendart of endangering Blog. Hendart, without objecting to the claim, suggested going to bed to feel good in the morning. Hendart uttered a strange phrase about the need for rest to regenerate the Blog's skin so that it would become soft. Blog still didn't understand anything. He asked his friends why they were arguing about Blog's free time. "Because we're friends," came the reply. The lizards were tracking the trio, but the friends had not yet detected any surveillance. Blog agreed to go to bed, but a strange sound alerted him. Preparing for battle. We're under attack by humanoid beings. The fight was very short, because the lizard's men simply ran away. It turned out that the man-eaters were being chased by huge chickens, which in turn were being chased by chicken hunters. It was Han Sol and his squad of ghouls. It turns out that Han Sol has begun to create a new world order in this world. Han Sol, watching with his disciples from the bushes, asks if they are confident, for the muscles of these cokes look much bigger than those of the ghoul builders. One of the boys says they are only puffed up. Whoa! Puffed up? Where do they even get this heresy from? At the time of this argument, one of the kokes wanted to eat the worm, but her size prevented her from squeezing between the trees. However, this is not a barrier to Coco. In one mighty movement, the hen broke the two trees that prevented her from reaching her goal, and calmly caught the worm. It became clear that the ghoul builders were going to have a hard time hunting, but one of the guys went up into the trees and decided to prove that he was as strong as this chicken. Then, straining all his muscles, he tried to push the trees apart, but he failed. It's nothing. He'll rest for a minute and try again. After resting properly, using the correct technique, Ghoul again tensed all his muscles, but he again failed. Wonder what this is all about. Han Sol did a great job of training them with various push-ups and improvised exercise machines. At that moment, the hero turned his attention to the kokes, who were clutching their wings together, jostling with each other for food. And then he realized. Because of the constant progress of the ghoul builders, the hero completely forgot that their bodies are just used to his workouts. So they're going to change their training methodology right now. Han Sol lines up the ghouls in 5 rows and after a while shows them the new simulator. It's a crossover exercise that trains the inner chest muscles. Once the guys master this exercise, they will easily beat Coco. Upon hearing this, the ghoul builders immediately perked up and began to thank the coach. Han Sol is flattered by this, of course, but he'd better calm down. He's going to explain the proper technique to them now. It's not that easy, so the hero will show things slowly. First, you need to bend your upper body and bend your knees, and second, fix your arms slightly, bent, so that there is no unnecessary movement. Third, when your arms are centered, you need to pull your chest out a little bit. Like a bird flapping its wings, and of course the positioning of the rope, using different sections of the chest. Han Sol has done some crossovers, so guys can get started. And naturally, having heard the permission from the coach, they immediately ran to the simulators to pump their pectoral muscles, and for a while, guys started showing off their pecs. To prove how much stronger and more powerful the guys have become, the ghouls decide to attack the chickens. But the chickens undergo a transformation into cocos and become even bigger and stronger. Thus, the ghouls fails to win the battle with the cocos. The guys don't understand. They pumped their muscles like Mr. Han Sol taught. So why did they lose? Maybe their technique is failing them or they're looking in the wrong place? No, it's not that. They seem to have a problem with the basics. Perhaps because chickens have been practicing all their lives and ghouls have just started training? Who said that nonsense? Han Sol asked. There is another way to prevail. You just have to remember how they got here. How did they get there? Yes. All together? Everybody get into the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Is it hard? No, it's not. What do you mean, no? How stubborn have you become? But you still have to practice? Just because you've gotten a little stronger doesn't mean you've stopped being the weakest. Han Sol told them how he had practiced before the competition. Therefore, everything that happened before was just a warm-up. If there is not enough strength in the pectoral girdle muscles, you need to use your leg strength. Realizing this truth, the ghouls rush to attack the cocos. Ghoul Builder instantly rushes from his seat and flies straight at cocos with the speed of a bullet. Han Sol supports the enthusiasm of his students. For 3 months, they have been preparing for this moment, so let them show their results. However, cocos knocked down first one and then all the other Ghoul Builders with a single blow. "Why are we losing?" shouted the ghouls. The hero completely forgot that during the training, the hunters had overworked their leg muscles, so they needed to rest. Unfortunately, this realization comes to him too late, and the cocos, satisfied with the victory, turn their attention to Han Sol. Overflowing with rage and competitive spirit, the chickens rush at our hero, putting all their strength. A dozen hens rushed at Han Sol to wipe him out. Han Sol calmly met this attack. When Han Sol looked at her, one of the chickens remembered all the moments of her life. Hearing those words, the chicken's whole life flashed before her eyes. The moment of hatching, the first training, sessions, first struggle for worms, first evolution into cocos, and the last thing the chicken saw was Han Sol's hand. In the evening, at dinner, the coach supported his boys. "You're making progress. Today we'll replenish your protein and tomorrow you'll catch a cocos yourself." "Yes." "To muscle. We can do it." After a hearty dinner and a good rest, Han Sol ordered his apprentices to be careful on the hunt, for if they hurt themselves, they might die, or worse, not be able to train. They realize that, of course, but won't the Lord go with them for backup? Why do you say that? Han Sol was surprised, but first he'll practice on his own, because daily practice is very important. At this, the Ghoul Builders wished their teacher strong muscles and departed. Han Sol starts practicing. The only thing that frustrates him is the small weight of his equipment. We should have brought the old Lord with us after all. Ghoul Builders, on the other hand, are warming up and discussing strategy at this point. They're already strong enough to handle Coco. But here's the thing. If any of them evolve into cocos, they'll lose. So what do? Just practice and go back saying they tried it and it didn't work out? No, of course not. There's a plan. Neither Mr. Han Sol nor the old Lord told the men how they should catch the cocos. If there's only one coco, the boys will beat him easily. A large group of Ghoul Builders corners one coco. And this will be their first victory. The guys decide to split into 3 groups and give each other warning signals in case of danger. Looks like the plan is ready, which means it's time to start the operation. At the same time, 3 fighters from Verdo County found a huge skeleton. It was the skeleton of a cockatrice. Cockatrice's head was torn off as if it had been chopped off in one powerful spell. The only one capable of such a thing is High Mage Adam, suggests Blog. He's not sure the squad can handle this case anymore, but his friends reassure him that he's safe. At which point, the guys are distracted by a strange humming noise. Riper and Hendart immediately rise to Blog's defense, and Coco jumps out of the bushes. It's okay. The Coco are no problem for them. But then some strange creatures come running out after the Coco. Ghoul builders cross glances with the swordsman, and the friends immediately huddle even closer to Blog, for they had never seen such monsters. The ghouls are not going to act rashly because humans are a violent people who get high on killing, and now is not the time for rash decisions. The ghoul builders start playing with their pecs. Blow thinks this is some kind of intimidation. But no, the ghouls is just signaling the second and third group. And at that moment, the ghoul builders call to their friends cross the boundaries of one species and enlarge the pectoral muscles of the Coco, causing them to evolve into Cocos. Blog read about Cocos. The Cocos is as strong as a wyvern. At this time, all the evolved Cocos ran to the ghoul builders. Ghouls stopped in confusion. They seemed to have made the wrong choice. But suddenly a second and third group emerged from the forest. That means they won't lose this battle. Everyone's ready to go into battle. When guys were doing chest presses and couldn't handle the weight, Mr. Saul would back them up. After all, if you want to test your strength without risk, you will have to rely on your comrades. It's a secret technique of the ghoul builders. It's press with a safety net. The powerful beaks of the Cocos crash into the equally powerful arms of the ghoul builders. But thanks to the support of their comrades, they can show all their strength and crush these pathetic chickens. This incredible fight was the first step to getting out of the weaker class. One of the guys who had received no support and was already saying goodbye to his life was suddenly aided by 3 swordsmen who cut Cocos to pieces in one motion, however. Unfortunately, the cockatrices answered that call as well. In this world, the cockatrices are descended from dragons, because long ago, the mightiest dragon divided its power, and one half became a cockatrice, while the other half remained a dragon. And now one of the descendants of the ancient cockatrice stands before our warriors. The warriors of Verdo County have bravely taken the fight to the cockatrice. Cockatrice is attacked by Hendart on one side and Riper on the other. As the battle rages on, Han Sol, unaware that his disciples are in mortal danger, ponders the fact that the ghoul's muscles are growing, while his own muscle mass is not. And yet, he's glad. These newcomers follow him flawlessly. They used to be anchovies that only knew how to suffer. In the beginning they wanted to give up, but their persistence did the trick. Beautiful muscles have developed in them, and this pleases our hero. Now he misses his mentor more than ever. Mr. Han Sol, disaster! The Coco have evolved, and now we're all in danger. Ghoul builders could die. Just tell me which way they are. That way. Warning. Energy beyond the capabilities of the muscles has been recorded. Stop the skill of compressing it? Yes? No. Who dares attack my babies? Combat compression skill has been terminated. Han Sol made an incredibly powerful leap and rushed into the forest to protect his precious disciples. The swordsman continued to fight Cockatrice, and Riper ordered Hendart to distract the enemy, and the latter raised a pillar of sand with his huge sword. Really? He did it so that a huge rooster wouldn't see where the Blow would run. But Blow shouted that now was not the time to hide, and Hendart was told to attack. In the end, Riper's attack did nothing, but he supported his friends. It's okay, Blog said to ignore it and keep attacking Cockatrice. A few Cocos joined the fray. The swordsman decided to retreat as well. In danger, however, is Blog, who is standing in the main line of attack of the chickens and will not have time to dodge. The ghoul builders rallied in a set of unified support and blocked all of Coco's kicks. The only thing that keeps them from losing is faith in their coach and faith in their friends who have each other's backs. But unfortunately, even that powerful belief is not enough, and Cocos breaks through their defense, and it seemed like nothing could save the gully, and suddenly... Did Mr. Han Sol make it at the very last moment? No! It's the old lord, but what is he doing here, and where is Mr. Sol? And Han Sol lands somewhere in the distance, behind the old lord's back. After all, he flew to the wrong place. The Cocos immediately surround the old lord and intend to kill him. Is this the best the poor roosters can do? Asks the old lord. Swordsmen point out that in his position, it's not appropriate to behave like this. Or maybe he's a lot stronger than a whole bunch of kokas? One of the ghoul builders advises the swordsman to watch carefully, for it's none other than the Old Lord. But from the looks of the kokas, the Old Lord doesn't exactly scare the monsters. What do they really think, that a former lord could show up for battle unprepared? When the ghoul builders heard this, they immediately cheered up. They immediately realized that the Old Lord had a fancy plan. That's right. I am the Old Lord, pissed them off. So now defeat them, Mr. Han Sol. Mr. Han Sol. You're up, Mr. Han Sol. Why don't you show up? Where are you, Mr. Han Sol? 6 hours before, the Old Lord had already gotten tired of waiting for the guys from the hunt, and the food had long since run out. So he decided to go along with the guys. Cockatrice had been dead for a long time anyway, so he was definitely not in any danger. And while walking in the forest, he heard the cries of his favorite ghouls. Who dared to hurt his little ones? No one but him and Han Sol has the right to bully them. No. Or maybe there's been a sudden reassessment of values, and now the strongest man doesn't rule? Also no, there's only one reason. In order to remain the right hand of the hero, he had to use his skill 100%. And then one day, he discovered that his weighting ability had reached its maximum level. With this skill, he lightened the weight of the stone by 10 times and launched it into the sky. And as soon as the cobblestone was above the roosters, he immediately increased the whole projectile, and with this powerful attack tore the cockers to shreds. But right now, the Lord doesn't have that much time to prepare an attack. What should he do? Ghouls cheers him up and says that the Old Lord was able to overpower several roosters at once. Maybe he is as strong as Mr. Console? He was born the strongest of his race, and if so, he would definitely defeat those winged bastards. But at the same moment, the Old Lord was launched into flight by Kokas with a single blow. Blog apologized to friends for not always laughing at their jokes. Blog, even before his death, retained his sense of humor, joked the boys. But his end will not be lonely, for his friends and ghoul builders are with him. This entire crowd threw themselves into their final battle, each of them realizing that they were about to meet their end. But none of the ghoul builders had any regrets. If there is a rebirth, they would like to train with Hansol-san again. To Old Lord Ghoulie, at this moment, our hero had already arrived. Mr. Sol, our servants, please, save them, please. Hearing these words, our hero exploded with rage, and even his coolness skill couldn't cope with this storm of emotions. At the most decisive moment of the ghoul builder's fight with the roosters, the latter simply ran towards the forest, because the roosters sensed an incredible power nearby, and immediately surrounded its source to kill it instantly. But how unlucky for them, because the cold-blooded skill had just been deactivated for 24 hours. The ghoul builders and swordsmen immediately ran after the roosters, for they too felt that it was their master. Blog doesn't understand who this master is, but the ghouls reply that it is their master, and a master of muscle mass development, which only makes Blog have more questions. To explain in simpler terms, it's their new ghoul's lord who is currently facing huge cockatrices. One of the cockatrices immediately attacks the hero, but Hansol uses a one-handed press and sends the rooster flying. The other roosters immediately fly up into the sky and do a somersault and rush down to crush the hero with their bodies. With all their sheer mass, the roosters press the hero into the ground, but Hansol holds these carcasses with an army press, like an Atlantean holding up the firmament with his shoulders. The hero immediately threw off his chicken legs, and using the toes of one of them, he flew towards the giant's beak in one powerful leap to smash it with a lunge of his knee. But it looks like he broke not only the beak but also the rooster's neck. Hansol said that Kokas respond to the call of the pecs and evolved, so our hero called the roosters and they quickly found him. So with his pecs, our hero will be able to touch the depths of their souls. But will the pathetic chickens be able to do the same to him? Hansol immediately does a burpee and smashes the beak of another creature in a leap before sticking his hands into the ground, and his aura turning into an unliftable weight. His arms are filled with incredible strength. Raising them upward, the hero scatters cobblestones in all directions and sends several more cockatrices flying. But this was not enough to cope with the roosters, so Hansol seized a huge log and with a leap with the log struck each of the creatures, after which he performed a graceful gymnastic somersault, and taking the shape of a Greek god, using all his might, hurled the A-log in the chest of one of the enemy. The battle was watched by swordsmen and ghoul builders. Blog is amazed at the power of the ghoul lord. In his eyes, it was just some incredible monster. At this moment, Han Sol realized that when he jumped to get here, the strength of his legs had been completely used up, and he wouldn't be able to continue fighting. But if he gave up now, how would he then look into the eyes of the old lord who had helped him with his training? There's a solution! In the last movement, Han Sol would put all the power and resources of his body into it. In the blink of an eye, the hero flew up into the sky and his body swelled to an incredible size. He'll end the battle with just one repetition. The system immediately sounded the alarm. If he does not stop, his leg muscles will not be able to bear the load of his upper body. He needs to reduce the load immediately. Otherwise, the consequences will be very dire. Here, the hero felt many hands touching his back. They are ghoul builders and swordsmen who are going to do a strength training with support. With this backup, Han Sol immediately tore through the cockatrices and killed all the winged creatures with one powerful piercing blow. We can consider the training session over for today. The Kukaris had badly wounded the old lord, and Han Sol had already said goodbye to him. Now after this battle, the only thing that worried the hero was the state of health of the old lord. But to everyone's happiness, it turned out that he was fine. And a couple days later in the county of Weirdo, Riper and Hendart reported to the Earl about Han Sol, who defeated Cockatrice and gained the upper hand over Kokas. The Earl does not see ghouls as a threat. However, Lord Ghouls may become a big problem because there's no telling when other races will start dividing the world. Swordswoman Mentor. Rihanna is most interested in where the blog is now. Riper and Hendart tearfully tell the teacher what happened after the victory over the Roosters. Han Sol began to examine Blog from all sides, admiring his posture. The swordsmen immediately prepared to pounce on Han Sol, despite their wounds. Hendart threw 2 powerful blows, but the Ghoul Lord simply stopped their attacks with his bare hands and offered to train Blog. To do this, Han Sol suggested that he train together, so they had no other choice, and they gave him the Blog. The swordsmen asked for help from their mentor to rescue Blog from the hands of the monsters. The Count objected to the request for help, saying that he would not go to war with another race because of one warrior. The leader of the swordsmen, however, did not listen to her master at all, and ordered that all the warriors of the county should be summoned, because this Han Sol made a mistake when he took away her favorite disciple. Meanwhile, on the ghouls' practice field, the hero told the underlings that there is a newcomer with them today, so they will start training with basic exercises, namely squats. Blog wonders what these are? Han Sol, of course, will now explain everything. Squatting is a great exercise to develop your thigh muscles. All the Blog needs to do is sit up comfortably. Blog obeys the coach's order without objection, squats down, but the hero stops him. Blog needs to get up and sit down with proper posture to avoid injury. Feet should be placed shoulder-width apart, while squats, you need to tense the muscles of the legs and back, and then direct all the force into the legs and stand up. Blog learned the correct technique quite quickly for his first time. Had he practiced before? Han Sol asked, but Blog was only trained in fencing. Han Sol asks Blog to squat down and put his hands up. He's going to give him some extra weight now. And as soon as the hero lowers the barbell into Blog's hands, the incredible weight immediately presses the athlete to the ground. But hearing Han Sol's motivational call, Blog makes an explosive leap and stands up, bearing that weight. The hero immediately picks up the barbell so Blog doesn't hurt his muscles. Amazing, because it was almost the weight limit for Blog, but the guy was able to get up without making a single mistake in the stand-up. Eyes did not deceive Han Sol. Blog's body is perfect for powerlifting. The hero asks Blog if Blog is firmly committed to training in order to get stronger. Yes, Blog wants to become as strong as its new friends. Blog is very happy that Han Sol decided to take him for a workout and make him a little stronger. Wow. Han Sol didn't understand what the guy was muttering to himself. In fact, Blog realized it right from the start. Such a simpleton would never be able to compare to geniuses. However, he was grateful to Mr. Han Sol for helping him, and hoped that he would become strong in another sense, much stronger than these foolish swordsmen. Han Sol told the guy that he had the best talent the hero had ever seen. At those words, the boy got upset and started crying, because no one had yet to recognize Blog as a talented person. The next day, the hero brought chickens. Of course, you could just hunt cows without thinking about the future, but then sooner or later, they're gonna eat them all. That's why Han Sol decided to cultivate them so they wouldn't become extinct. The old lord remarks that it is very easy to raise cocoa in a short time, but there's no one stronger than these monsters in Ali's mines. Sure, ghouls are already stronger than kokas, but if they evolve, no one but Han Sol can handle them. Excuse him? What do you mean? You can't handle it? Have you no faith in yourself and our ghouls, old lord? No, no, no. Mr. Han Sol, of course I do. Good. 'Cause you sounded like a wuss just now. Don't do that again. Yes, sir. After this conversation, everyone went to practice. Blog was already doing the preset, and with the help of the old lord, he was perfect at max weight and laying himself out to the limit, but the ghouls builders were keeping up with the newcomer as well. However, the metallic clang of the blades of the enraged Verdo County warriors rang out. And in the same second, a lightning-fast attack of swordsmen nearly took the old lord's life, but he was able to jump back. What the hell is this? At this moment, Rihanna approached the old lord and asked if he was the impudent one who took her student away. The old lord replies that the swordswoman has confused him with someone else. It's the first time he's seen her, and besides, he's the one who's had his seat taken from him, Lord Ghouls. Without even listening to him, the swordswoman wanted to destroy this monster with one powerful blow, although Han Sol managed to block the sword attack with his bare hand. What a twist! Were you able to stop her attack with your body? The swordswoman is surprised, but Han Sol is very displeased. Not only did this madam distract his students, but she also left a wound on his beautiful muscles. Seeing his serious face, Rihanna puts her sword back in its scabbard in one clear motion, and asks the students if this is the Han Sol they've been telling about. Those with tears in their eyes confirm her hunch and beg her to return Blog. Sorry, stranger, Rihanna said, for interrupting the training, but Han Sol shouldn't have taken her student. Wait, what is it? Blog already had a teacher? Then that came out a little rude. Blog starts mumbling something to himself as usual, but Han Sol realizes what he's trying to say without even hearing him. Fitness workouts appeal to Blog much more than fencing, don't they? Blog should just be honest with its mentor. After hearing his coach's words, Blog apologizes to Rihanna and says he now has a new mentor. Blog feels bad that Rihanna and the disciples have come all this way for nothing, but fencing is not his strong point. Well, if that's the case, it can't be helped. Rihanna will have to forcefully retrieve her apprentice. With these words, she suddenly attacked the hero, but he started posing in time and calmly fought back. All this begins to hurt Rihanna's pride, because her sword leaves only scratches on him. And Blog wants a body like Han Sol's. The guy confirms her words that there is only one way to judge them. She'll fight the stranger, and whoever wins will take Blog. After all, that's the only way to determine whose martial art is stronger. Okay, whoa, fitness training is not a martial art, it's self-discipline. It's a workout, not a fight. But it was Han Sol who defeated cockatrice through training. Isn't that right? That's right. But our guys needed protein as Han Sol only fights to survive. I see, so training is a waste of time. What did you say? Why is he blushing so red? The swordswoman must have hit a nerve. But she's right. What's the use of his self-education? Simply put, practicing is a futile endeavor. At this moment, Han Sol's combat muscle compression mode is activated. Now Han Seol will show her what training can do. With the help of a hawk's eye, the hero can see all of the swordswoman's stats. She has nothing but muscle. But where does that strength come from? Han's muscles are simply impossible to cut with a blade. But she did it. Rihanna distracts the hero and says that his training allows him to change his body, but her swordsmanship allows him to use combat energy. With those words, the swordswoman soared into the air and attacked Han Sol from a distance, but he managed to close in. Rihanna is going to teach the stranger a lesson or two, and he needs to find out why she calls Hansol a stranger. But without listening to his opponent, Hansol lunges at Rihanna, saying he doesn't care. However, she dodged and jumped a dozen meters before continuing her monologue. Although Hansol looks like a human, his mana color is scarlet. Only demons have that kind of mana, and ordinary people have it as well. There are no techniques that can change the body. With those words, Rihanna launched a devastating aerial attack. Hansol bounced up and shouted that the body was changing if one applied force. Does the swordswoman not even understand the basics? No. It's Hansol who doesn't realize that only foreigners like him can do that. Normal people can use magic or martial energy. And now, she will show what those skills can do. And with her blade technique, Rihanna summons hundreds of swords composed of energy. And all that energy is attacking the hero at the same time. Unfortunately, Hansol fails to react in time and is wounded, though they didn't penetrate his muscles, but they did considerable damage. And walking over to the Hansol lying on the ground, the swordswoman asks if he now understands why his training is garbage to people. How can Hansol's art be able to overpower swordsmanship that is only set up to defeat opponents every day? Hansol replied to the swordswoman that her opponent was not standing still either. The one she defeated today would be even stronger tomorrow. How stupid is that? Rihanna exclaimed. Why would she worry about that when the man she defeated today just won't live to see tomorrow? With those words, the swordswoman calls for the swords of light again, but Hansol managed to stand up and began to pose with a double biceps in front, leveling all the pathetic efforts to injure the Greek god's body again. Everyone who is involved in fitness training is always getting stronger to beat yesterday's self. They train more and more until they become real titans. Meanwhile, Blog's friends approached to Blog. They would like to apologize for their behavior, because the guys decided that they would never see their friend again, so they brought their mentor, although they knew that after that he would hate them even more. What? What are they talking about? Why would he hate them? Asked Blog. What do you mean? Why? You left because we pushed you too hard, friends said. What did they think they were doing? Block just wanted to practice and then go home. Hearing this, the guys immediately got excited, and since this problem is solved, they want to find out what these workouts are all about. Blog will happily show everything, of course, if the old lord helps them. As he approached the barbell, Blog explained the squat base, that he had time to learn from Hansol. Blog asked the old lord for help with weighting. The old lord was immediately wary of whether it was dangerous to increase the weight like this on his own. But Blog replied that nothing would happen, because he would support them. At this time, Hansol and Rihanna continued their battle, and Rihanna began to lose. Suddenly Rihanna heard her disciples moaning, and was surprised to see half-naked, horny boys squatting with support. Stop! Break! Is this really what they call training? Hansol replies that it's a loaded squat, one of the basic workouts. After seeing these exercises, the swordswoman herself wanted to send her students to train. So Rihanna apologizes to Hansol, and the hero asks what she liked about the training. Of course, the hot passion of young, resilient bodies that pump their muscles without sparing themselves. Upon hearing this response, our heroes declared a truce. Our hero noticed Rihanna's gorgeous forearms. How'd she work them out? The swordswoman is surprised that the stranger is interested in this particular thing. But it's simple here. She works with a sword every day, so she pumped up her arms. Then Rihanna asks Hansol why he's teaching his specialty art for free. What kind of stupid question is that? Said Hansol. Of course, if more people practiced, it would be better. If he trains a lot of people, sooner or later gyms will open, research will be done, and new exercise programs will be created. Ideally, Hansol would like to bring fitness gym culture to every corner of the world. Yeah, that actually makes sense. Turns out the stranger is a lot more interesting than meets the eye. So Rihanna promises to fulfill one request of his as soon as he has it. In the evening, Hansol set up camp with his new and old disciples. During dinner, Blog came up to Hansol and told him that discrimination reigns in Weirdo County. Swordsmen despise not only other races, but also mages and all non-believers and so on. It's not just people, it's swordsmen. Young guys like Blog are certainly not racist, but here's the general mass of people being aggressive. Blog worries that the feelings of the ghoul billers and Han Solo himself will be hurt. Yes, that's a serious problem, Han Solo remarked. So the blog suggests that maybe they should wait to visit? But Han Solo simply ignored those words and walked over to the horse feeder. Raking the feed into his hand, he realized at once that this was the main food for health. It's oats. Thinking it's pure carbohydrates, Han Solo starts eating oats right off the feeder. In the end, the hero didn't listen to Blog at all because he had a serious problem on his mind. The soldiers of the county lose their appetite at the look of Han Solo, and one of the soldiers can't even believe that this barbarian eats with the cattle. The old lord behind them interrupts the warriors and says that their words are hurtful to the monsters. And pulling from behind his back a plate with his special dish made from the soldiers' provisions, the old lord offers them a taste. Men, even from a distance, can smell that tantalizing scent. How did he make it out of their stale rations? And as soon as they taste the dish, their tongues are struck by a lightning bolt of pleasure, so splendidly that the stern warriors cannot hold back their tears. Did you like it? If they stopped insulting his race, the old lord would become their friend and share the recipe. And while Khan's right-hand man was building relationships with people, Han Solo himself came to Rihanna. She promised to fulfill one request of his, right? He decided what he wanted, and extending his hand with grains of oats, he asks the swordswoman for the plant. Cattle feed? Oh, that's right. The blog told me that Han Solo wants to raise cokes, so he wants to feed them. No. The ghouls with Han Solo will be eating oats. Wow! Rihanna doesn't care about that. But if he spends the request on cattle feed and eats it himself, she'll feel guilty. Ghoul builders completely agree with her. Swordswoman holds a high place in society after all. Why wouldn't the Lord ask for something more worthwhile? What did you say? Rion interrupts Han Solo and says that his subordinates are right. She can give much more than cattle feed. And besides, they already have a bunch of chicken breasts. Why do they need more food? No. You're so shallow. It's not like that at all. If you eat only protein, the liver will suffer greatly. But if you add enough carbohydrates to the protein, it will produce glycogen. Glycogen improves metabolism, and oats, which contain a variety of carbohydrates, is low in calories but high in nutrients. So oats are the king of cereals. Hearing this, the ghoul builders immediately exclaimed that if Mr. Khan Salt says so, then oats are the best food. The soldiers, who have heard the whole conversation, think that maybe this is the stranger's secret. That's probably how he was able to level with their commander. Hell, they can't lose to monsters, so they decide to try oats too. And Blog started eating oats before Han Solo had even finished his speech. Maybe swordsmen should try it too. But when they tried to eat oats from a cattle feeder, they immediately realized that the taste of oats is disgusting. Ryder, seeing that Blog is still eating oats, says he can stop. Even the ghouls have already spit that nasty stuff out. This is unbelievably delicious. This is the first time Blog has ever eaten something this amazing. Han Solo, hearing this, realizes that this guy has talent even in food, and he will surely start to progress very quickly. Okay, if you insist, I'll grant your request, said Riona, and held out her hand, and Han Solo began to rejoice like a little child. The next day, the entire troop arrived in Weirdo County. Blog tells Han Solo that their county of Weirdo is the best on the continent, but in fact the county is the worst, because it's a place where discrimination reigns. Thousands of judgmental and contemptuous glances of the townspeople were now directed only at the ghouls as monsters hated by the townspeople. The guys feel those hard stares, but Han Solo asks, why is it that ghouls are so tense? They would take a moment to pose, because their bodies look great, and that's why people look up to them. Ghouls realize this is true, but Blog doesn't see it that way. But that doesn't stop the ghouls from starting to pose, and the townspeople don't understand why these barbarians are so happy at all. They come to the governor's hall, and Count Weirdo asks Han Solo the following. You will leave the county after learning the techniques of training my swordsmen, and as a reward you want to receive cattle fodder? Did the Count get it right? Han Solo replies that it's not actually fodder, but sports nutrition. From the cheeky speech, Count Weirdo immediately realized that Han Solo was from a nation of barbarians. And with great disdain, the Count says that it was only at Rihanna's request that he made an exception and let the monsters in. If not for this request, they would have been pelted with arrows. The swordswoman thanks Count Weirdo for his patience, but he shouts with a shriek, interrupts her, and tells Han Sol and his monsters to quietly train the soldiers and quietly leave the kingdom. Our hero replies to him that he agrees and invites the Count to join the training. Count Weirdo agrees because Riona is immensely popular, and the Count did not know how to get the people on his side, and if she makes a mistake, there will be a great opportunity for him. The Count decides to call in a warrant of Tutul's mercenaries. Commander Riona, your guests will do me good yet. At this time, Yu Han Seol comes to the soldiers' training field and is introduced as Lord Ghouls. Of course, the soldiers don't understand why they will be taught by a monster. However, the mentor explains to them with a shouted explanation that Commander-in-Chief Riona personally gave the order that they must obey Han Sol. The hero interrupts him and says he's happy to welcome the guys, but he doesn't particularly like their looks, so his first order of business is to start doing push-ups. Han Sol immediately gets into a push-up stance with the ghouls and shouts for the soldiers to start doing push-ups, but one of the soldiers is not going to follow the monster's orders. The coach reminds him that it's Riona's orders to obey Yu Han Sol during training. Does he really think that the words of a monster are equal to the words of a commander? To this, the coach could not answer anything, and Dridge continued his speech. Are they really going to listen to a monster? Well, since he asked, there are plenty of problems. First of all, humans don't listen to monster orders. Second, how will training help them? I mean, they're already studying fencing. What's the point of changing their training? One last thing. People are not willing to learn barbaric training methods. The old lord intervenes in the conversation and says he'll straighten things out. The first problem can be solved by making Blog Khan's right-hand man. Then the orders will be given by a human. He had never compared friction and swordsmanship. But here, if they had a friendly duel, it would immediately become clear whose art was stronger. And thirdly, the question of whether they are barbarians or not. This will be decided in a duel with the arrogant humans, each of the ghouls, ready to defend their race with honor. Han Sol is proud of his boys, who've only just become strongmen and are already so brave. Seeing their attitude, the soldier agrees. He'll be on the human side. Who's going to be on the monster side? One of the ghouls stepped forward with utmost confidence, not a single muscle in his body making an unnecessary movement. Except that the soldier forgot to mention that he was no ordinary student. In fact, this freak is from Earl Weird's elite squad, hired by him to sabotage the place. He immediately lunges at Ghoul and is about to kill him with one punch. Ghoul, however, without even tensing up, takes a light palm thrust to the jaw, and the bastard flies dozens of meters away. Luckily, the fighter survived. Han Sol scolds a student and says he's pumping up his muscles to show his strength. Ghoul apologizes and says he threw a weak punch and he didn't expect the soldier to be so weak. Okay, since this one didn't happen on purpose, and Han Sol forgives Ghoul. The hero then approaches the soldiers and says that, since they have lost, they must obey. Of course, no one objects. However, our fighter had already regained consciousness and activated combat energy. He uses it to get close to Ghoul in a second, and just before the fighter is about to strike, the old lord weights his body and pins him to the ground, and Han Sol at that moment gets close to the bastard and with a light push of his palm sends him into the wall to think about his behavior. At this moment, Riona came to the training field and saw the commotion among the fighters. Those are whispering about how the monsters 100% used magic to win, so you can't trust the monsters. Hearing this, the commander-in-chief orders the situation to be reported. The coach immediately tells her about the contest and how the monsters cheated. Riona asks Han Sol about it, and he says he doesn't use magic. The mentor didn't feel anything wrong either, but... Do you trust these monsters more than you trust your own people? Said Count Weirdo, who happened to be passing by and overheard the conversation. The bastard deliberately puts the issue so that she has to choose in front of everyone which side she's on. Riona says she's on the Count's side, but he interrupts her and remarks that she believed the monsters at first. He certainly appreciates the commander-in-chief, but the guests she has brought have hurt his men, humiliated the student, and caused a riot amongst the Midway recruits. As the Earl, being the head of these lands, cannot turn a blind eye to this, so he has no choice but to punish Riona and send her into exile for 2 years. However, all the students immediately stood up for Riona. Good, that's what she wanted. With a sly smile, Rihanna told the fighters that how dare they challenge an order, Count. Rihanna thought she raised perfect soldiers, and these yokels can't even follow orders. She would have to take advantage of Count's request and go to exile. Rihanna apologizes to Han Sol for leaving him alone. Lastly, the swordswoman asks the Count to fulfill his promise and allow Han Sol to continue training for 3 months. The Count agrees. Rihanna realizes that everything is going according to her plan. She has prepared the soil. All that is left is to wait for the seeds of change to germinate. It's sure to be a fun place when she gets back. That same night, the fighter who had been making trouble was paid for his labors. A couple more orders like that and he won't have to deal with these provocations. After all, his wife loves flowers. Maybe he should open a flower shop and retire. Guy looks at a photo of the family and promises he'll be home soon. However, a fire in the village where the fighter's family lived brings much destruction and loss of life. Blue-haired Guy, watching the fire, is enjoying a painting he made himself. He and his girlfriend have just returned to their homeland, and he is overwhelmed by the joy of the fire and human grief he has created. A Guy asks his princess to dance to a symphony of human screams and agony. The next morning, the students escorted Rihanna on her 2-year journey. The mentor was surprised that Blog was here too. He's supposed to be training with Han Sol. But the thing is, there's no training today, so Mr. Han Sol and let him go. Well, if that's the case, then we should pay Rihanna a visit. Except Blog's worried that if the Count sees her mentor within the confines of the castle, because he'll be very angry. But Rihanna tells him not to worry because she'll figure it out. Well, if she says so, Blog will trust and help her if something happens. Rihanna notices that the boy has become much more confident. Even in his voice you can hear the growing strength. And if he becomes even stronger, Rihanna will even take him as a fiancé. Mentor's in her 60s. Isn't she a little old to be marrying him? Says Blog about the age difference, but luckily for him, his friends managed to grab Rihanna and hold him for a while. Han Sol gave the disciples the task of catching slugs. The students went hunting, and in the midst of the hunt, Rihanna and her students came in. She was immediately interested in what they were after, slugs. Lord Han Sol ordered them to recruit them, but why? This they will already show, because ghoul-billers can't explain. A little while later, the guys took the swordsman to the hero, but Rihanna still has a question. Why does he need slugs? It's simple. Han Sol has a lot of students, but not enough simulators, so he's going to make them himself. Now he's going to show him how it's done. Ghoul tosses the slug at his feet, and Han Sol plucks a small part of it from him in one crisp motion. Within a few days the body will grow back around it, and if you make a hole in the remaining slime and then give it a good tug, you will get a very elastic belt. Depending on the color of the slime, the strength of the elasticity will be different, so you can easily find a working weight. Han Sol built up a whole lecture on CrossFit, but Rihanna interrupted him and apologized. Wait, what is she apologizing for? Han Sol may not have noticed, but the swordswoman had been very careful and attentive the entire time. She thought the good-naturedness and eagerness to educate people was just a common pretense, but as she watched him, she realized he wasn't lying. But she's a failed coach herself, raised by the Weirdo County system. But Han Sol, he's not like that. He can bring change to this country. Change? Yes. Han Sol is the master of bodybuilding. No, she's not talking about the students that Han Sol taught, but the students behind her. Rihanna brought her students with her, who are determined to practice properly this time. Han Sol now had a loyal following, but the winds of change did not blow only near the hero. Count Weirdo has already arrived at the village he destroyed fire. Their enemies are zombies. The biggest danger of these creatures is that they breed their own kind through their bites. Everyone needs to be more careful than ever. After giving a short briefing, the Count sent the warriors into action, and they bravely attacked the enemy, threatening the peaceful life of the kingdom. At that moment, a bunch of freaks were hiding in the bushes. Blue-haired man ordered the dog to calm down and lie down, but it wouldn't stop barking. Then the bastard kicked the dog with such force that it flew a couple of meters away. However, the dog immediately got up, and as if nothing had happened, and calmly came back. The blue-haired guy said they needed to wait a little longer to trap Earl Weird. On the training field for the soldiers, Han Solo was holding a class for the disciples. The character talked about the need to pump certain muscle groups. The trainer joined in and announced that after stretching, all the students were going to pump their abs. Han Solo interrupted the coach and announced that they would be doing CrossFit today. What is CrossFit? The coach was interested. CrossFit is a system of exercises designed to combine different exercises, different of varying lengths and intensities. In other words, it's a sport aimed at creating a hexagon that engages various body functions. It also helps build teams. All commands are fixed with the Old Lord, and he will distribute a set of required exercises to everyone. Parallel in the woods, there was some movement going on, but the athletes were busy doing business. But then Han Solo became interested in a sound he had been hearing for a long time. The coach explains to Han Solo that in the neighboring village, zombies are gathering and the Count is personally out to destroy them. But Han Solo said he feels like someone is constantly asking for reinforcements. It was clear that Han Solo hadn't heard anyone, the coach said. In the morning, the Count and his army had defeated all the zombies in the village, but their sentries found the enemy base. This time, they can eliminate the zombie menace once and for all. An entire army shouts a triple hurrah, anticipating victory over a longtime enemy. The Count sends this army into battle, and a crowd of trained soldiers begin to destroy the zombies. The senior military commander is a little concerned if they've gone over the too far away. What the hell is he talking about? Zombies have no intelligence and cannot use strategy. Our warriors are already approaching the enemy, so the Count orders them to keep up the pace and keep moving. At this time, a small group of soldiers had already run into the organizer of this celebration, but the latter, with a snap of his fingers, summoned his aides who defeated the soldiers in a flash. Now it's time for the main individuals, led by Ben, to take the stage. Ben notices that it is immediately obvious that these soldiers know nothing about war. They should use spears instead of swords. After all, when they are attacked by an enemy, they can't even strike without injuring Annalie. At the moment of this tirade, the Count lunges at Ben, but the latter easily deflects his blow. It's been a long time since they've seen each other. Ben notes that the Count has aged a lot. But he, on the other hand, can use battle energy normally like Riona? Was Ben really able to step up to Riona's level and retain his youth? What? Of course not. Ben hadn't practiced for a day, however. He had learned martial energy in a different way. With those words, the bastard pulls out a bunch of syringes and jabs them into his body, then turns into a huge, overpumped monster. Ben only laughs. The Count thinks Ben has mental problems, but the Count needs to defeat Ben somehow. Summoning his battle energy, the Count tries to strike with his sword in mid-air, but misses. Ben strikes back with his fist, but he too falls to the ground. Such a blow could kill, the Count decided, barely dodging the blow. The key is to anticipate the trajectory of the blow. Then the Count can strike. Concentrating his fighting energy, the Count tries to attack, but realizes that he can't overpower Ben after he turned into a monster. Ben continues to laugh, while the Count tries to solve the riddle. How can he defeat Ben? I was able to create myself, Ben said. And your art, Count, has always been swordsmanship, and those skills may not be enough to win. But you know Riona's power? The Count asked. Yes, I am aware of that, replied Ben, advised, turning the Count's attention to the battlefield. And on the battlefield, the Count's trained soldiers were defeated. My soldiers can't just die like this, cried the Count. And now it was the Count's turn to say goodbye to his life. Ben summarized and struck again. Using battle energy, the Count blocked the blow and ran away from the battlefield. The commander-in-chief wanted to take the blow, but when he saw the retreating Count, he too retreated. Ben laughed and said that once again the Count only cared about himself. We're losing the battle. We must retreat to the gates of the county, shouted the Count. The monsters at Ben's side wondered if the retreating soldiers should be pursued. Ben decided to leave them alone for now, for they were already clear on what needed to be done next. For the Count will think of nothing new but to gather the whole army to strike the whole force at one point, Arthas helping us in our scheme. The Count was approaching the castle and only one thought occupied him. How could the monsters be defeated? The Count requests a report on the military situation. Commander Rumi immediately informed him that out of 400 warriors, 347 were killed, 27 seriously wounded, and only 26 fighters were unharmed. There are 100 more warriors based in the fortress. The rest are just apprentices. The Count shouts hysterically. How can you fight a war with only 126 men in the army? Rumi offered to call Rihanna back, but there was no point because she wouldn't make it in time anyway. Then the girl offered to ask for help from the monsters that train in the castle, because their leader fought with Rihanna on equal terms. Besides, the county gives them shelter and food, and if the Count asks them, they are not likely to refuse. 3 days later, the Count reached the castle. The Count immediately rode to the training field, and in a commanding tone of voice ordered the training to stop and a public meeting to be called. Han Sol turned to the Count and asked if he had finally come for individual training, but the Count replied that he had come to give them orders. In a rude manner, the Count said that these filthy monsters should fight the zombies for the county giving them shelter and food, and the Count orders an army of monsters. But from the looks on the ghoul builders' faces, it's clear the ghouls has no desire to defend this brat. Then the Count says he can grant citizenship for merit, and then Han Sol can brag about his successes. Our hero doesn't let the Count finish and orders the ghoul builder to pose with a double biceps to the front. The Count didn't quite realize what it was they were doing now. Han Sol replied that posing is what bodybuilding bragging is all about. However, the Count has no time for these jokes. If they do not obey the order, then... Han Sol shouted at him, saying that athletes couldn't train if they hurt their muscles or died. The Count realizes that by the looks of it. He should apologize, and he apologizes and walks away. Han Sol orders the training to continue. The Count is upset that he failed to get the ghoul builders on his side. The Count orders Rumi to summon Commander Ox. Commander Ox's character is certainly bad, but he is not lacking in talent and is quite a bit inferior to Rihanna. After a while, an army of zombies gathered at the castle. All the forces of the county, including Ox and the Earl, had gathered to defend him, and before the whole horde could get into action, Commander Ox shouted that he wanted to talk to the leader of these monsters. Ben and his gang stepped forward, and when the Count saw the girl sitting on the monster's shoulder, suddenly the Count recognized her. "Is that Elise?" Ben asked. "What does this warrior want to tell him?" Commander Ox replied that he realizes that the zombie army is big, but the county warriors are well trained, and they have the castle's strong walls on their side. The commander proposes to act as a representative of the district and fight Rep Ben, and then the outcome of this battle will decide everything, and the will determine the winner. Ben agrees. He thinks it will be a lot of fun. Ox asks who will come out of the zombie side. The healthiest mutant immediately lunges forward and lets out a heartbreaking scream. Ox notices the mutant's fine physique. But what about his fighting skills? Beautiful. With those words, Commander Ox threw a dozen punches in a single second, but the monster ducked and spat at Ox, hoping to catch him off guard. Commander ducked, and it seemed to be for good reason. The zombie's saliva was like acid. Realizing that the monster didn't stand a chance against Ox, the bastard started to run away, but Commander Ox wouldn't let him go. With the words that the duel would only end when the monster died, Ox chased after the zombie. But it was a trap. A bone flew into Ox from behind. Of course, he easily fought it off and lunged at the dog who had distracted him from the sacred fight. But at that moment, Ben hit Commander Ox from behind. "What's the holy joust, you idiot?" Ben only agreed to this duel because Ox was the only obstacle to his plan, and Ben's goal was to lure Commander Ox into a fight. While Ben was talking about his principles, his monster started beating the swordsman to death. The Count's warriors from the walls could hardly watch this carnage. Commander Ox begged for mercy. Okay, Ben's in a good mood today, and he's snapping his fingers. The zombie monster tosses Ox up and he falls into a crowd of zombies who begin to devour him, and a minute later, he's joining the army of the dead. Ben then suggested that Earl surrender, and then Ben would spare Earl's life. Naturally, the Count refused. Okay, Ben wasn't going to keep his promise anyway. Ben ordered his army to tear down the damn gate. The Count in turn gave the order to fire the bows. But the problem is that swordsmen have never practiced shooting, and simply don't know how to do it. Rumi asks what they should do, and the Count doesn't know. The Count starts running away from the battlefield. And as he runs, he remembers his past. How as a child everyone teased him for being a coward. Even his father didn't respect him. Running away was a pathetic act. The younger Rihanna and Eliza were less aggressive towards him, but also kept telling him that he should become bolder. But the apogee of his cowardice was when he didn't save the girl. To hell with them all. The Count doesn't like to run away himself, but he can't help it. None of those who condemned him were in his shoes. But even a cowardly lord has dear people to protect. Thinking about this thought for a moment, the Count reached the training ground and began begging for forgiveness from the ghoul builders. Kneeling and sobbing, the Count begged them for help. In return, they could kill him. But please, just let them save his people. However, Han Solo understood it in such a way that the Count finally wanted to train himself. Count life is not necessary for ghoul builders, but for personal training you have to pay for it. The hero's new apprentices wanted to help as well, but Han Solo forbade them to do so. Those with less than 400 kilograms in 3 approaches are not allowed to participate in the war. On that pathos note, Han Solo goes with the Old Lord and the strongest ghoul builders to fight zombies. The Count still thinks their training is a silly style of fighting, but the sight of them from the back makes you wonder. A couple minutes later, Han Solo and ghouls saw the main gate, and since the path before them was straight, he ordered them to do an intense workout. For a minute and a half, they would run at the maximum speed. Everyone began to speed up except the Old Lord. They were moving too fast for him. Apparently, he needed to be involved in training once in a while. And while the Old Lord was thinking about it, the zombies got to the peaceful one's residence, with a few moments left before the zombies wanted to tear the mother and son apart. The ghoul builders took down the zombies. The child who noticed it told his mother that the monsters had come to save them. And observing the broad muscles of the ghoul builders, the child asked if he would become as strong if he studied fencing. But his mom answered him that monster martial arts were different from fencing. And when the war was over, Mom would be sure to ask the athletes how to become just as strong. After a couple more minutes, our heroes arrived at the main gate, which had been breached by zombies. Analyze the state of the zombies. Han Solo didn't even realize what kind of creatures they were, but they were clearly lacking in vitamins. Arriving belatedly, the Old Lord began to explain to the hero that zombies are mindless creatures driven only by hunger. They are essentially walking corpses. Then guilt can be avoided, Han Solo said, and destroyed the zombie with one push. The Old Lord inquired about the battle plan. First, the hero wants to use the strength of his pecs to push the dead outside the castle. What's wrong with your face, Old Lord? You don't like my plan? Han Solo asked. No, Mr. Hansel. It's terrific, said the Old Lord. Mr. Hansel, then may the Old Lord take charge the rest of the operation while you push them back? After taking command, the Old Lord immediately divided the ghouls into teams. The first and second groups would scatter around the area and rescue the civilians. The third and fourth groups will climb the walls and help the human soldiers, and Mr. Han Solo. Except he's doing a pretty good job of pushing this lot out on his own. The Count distracts the Old Lord and asks the monsters to close the main gate, otherwise it will all be useless. But the problem is that the gates have already been destroyed, and there is simply nothing to close. Nothing can stop the zombie army. Luckily for them, Blog saw this coming, and along with his older training companions, brought a huge weight to close the main gate. The Count and Rumi marveled at how they were carrying this weight at all. One of the ghoul builders is asking the Blog to go forward. His big and the thigh muscles are worn out. Ghoul just won't be able to keep going. Blog shouted that they shouldn't give up. Ghoul understands his worries for his older comrade, but if he overexerts himself, he'll get injured. And he won't be able to practice for at least a week, so the co-workers should just leave it alone and keep practicing without it. What the hell? That's far from all the Blog's concerns. The 3 of them are going to be crushed by this giant weight. His gaze begins to fade. I guess that's how he's gonna die. Oh, that feels better. It was the Old Lord who came to their rescue and reduced the weight of the kettlebell tenfold, and also ordered the 5th group to help the group with the kettlebell, and with renewed vigor, they all rushed to the goal to close the gap in the defense. And once Han Solo pushed the zombie horde beyond the walls of the city, Blog, along with 2 ghouls, carried the weights to the right place and blocked the passage. They did it through the power of true male friendship. After the grand success, the old lord ordered the load group to rest, and all other groups except the first and second to go push back the zombies along with Han Solo. The ghouls instantly rushed to the walls and jumped down safely to their lord, and started helping him drive out the zombies, remembering to tense your muscles for proper load distribution. At that moment, a zombie lunged at one of the ghoul builders. The man on the wall warned him to beware of the bite, or he would turn undead. But it was too late. The zombie clutched at Ghoul with a deadly grip, and his whole body felt like it had been struck by lightning. Gritting his teeth, he tried not to succumb to the spell of necromancy, but after a second he couldn't stand it, and howled like a wild beast. Except his comrade nudged him with his elbow and told him not to slack off, pretending he was infected. They're undead too, after all, and can't become zombies. What seems like a terrible tragedy to Rumi is just entertainment to these guys. Having determined that there was no point in biting the ghoul builders, the zombies rushed at our hero. But when their rotten teeth reached Han's trapezius muscle, the teeth simply snapped. "Don't get my muscles dirty," Han Solo said menacingly, and annihilated the zombie with a single palm strike. Ben, noticing the ghouls and the stranger, didn't understand why they were fighting on the side of the humans. Though it didn't matter anyway, Ben simply said "Fess," and his loyal monsters rushed at the ghoul builders. The swordsmen of the county, dreaming of avenging the deaths of Ivan and Ox, simply rushed forward. At this time the Count showed Han Solo to Ben, who was sitting in the distance under a tree, and said it was all his fault, but the hero didn't see the place where this Ben is sitting. The Count told him to just go ahead, and when he saw the blue-haired boy, he would need him. Realizing what needed to be done, our hero told to ghouls to stay and continue the fight without him. Using reverse breeding, Han Solo rushed out to find Ben. The Count, on the other hand, was once again convinced that Han Solo's strength was some kind of miracle. At this time, Ben complained to Elise about how useless his servants were. Ben didn't want to get personally involved, but new circumstances forced him to do so. Coming out to meet the hero, Ben used his chemistry lab to prepare for battle, and after a couple seconds, the warriors rushed at each other. It was immediately clear that our hero was 100 times more powerful than Ben. In one motion, Han Solo threw Ben to the ground and then began choking him. Ben demanded that Han Solo let him go, but it had no effect. "Is this really it?" Han Solo asked, and using the exercise rock climber, with which dragged Ben forward, dragging him along the ground. The two swordsmen were fighting the giant zombie at this time. Elise sensed the danger, and immediately, clad in her combat uniform, and together with the dog, rushed straight at the unknown enemy, who turned out to be a girl, and not just any girl, but Aunt Riona's favorite niece, named Ryan. The girls exchanged blows, at which time Elise sent the dog to help Ben, and the dog immediately obeyed the order, whereupon the battle between the two swordswomen began to gain momentum. A group of ghouls, under the command of an old lord, launched a huge boulder with the aid of rubber bands made from slugs, the weight of which was reduced by the old lord, and when the boulder flew into the air above the zombie, then the old lord would apply a weighting of 10 times its weight. After that, the boulder would disintegrate into pieces and fall on the zombies' heads. Everything obeyed a strict routine. One group loaded the stones. The first group was checking to see if there were any zombies left in the county. The second group was closing a gap in the fortress wall. Teams 3 and 4 were given the command to destroy the zombies. Observing what was happening, the Earl of Weirdo appreciated the leadership qualities of the Old Lord. It seemed as if the Old Lord had soared above the battlefield and could see how best to distribute his forces. Count remembered that there had been instances in the past where monsters had joined humans and become heroes of legends. For example, a monster named Wardagon is a brilliant warlord hero of the Fourth Great Demonic War. And we are once again transported to Han Solo, who continues to wipe Ben to the ground. Ben, seizing the moment, turned his hand into a spiked club and struck the hero's side with all his might. However, Han Solo grabbed his hand with his oblique muscles. Ben didn't realize what this creature even was. His hand was just stuck in the muscle of this stranger. Ben's dog got to his master at this time and used Bonado. Bonado. This is a necromancy spell combined with wind magic. The bones that fly at Bonado are as hard as steel. Unprotected, they'd just wipe a man out. And now 5 bodybuilders were headed straight for the defenseless Han Sol. However, it did absolutely no damage at all. But unfortunately, it distracted our hero, and Ben used a special drug that he didn't want to use because it hurt too much. The situation was reversed. With the drug, Ben began to turn into a huge monster of incredible strength. Taking advantage of this, Ben hit Han Sol with such force that he simply flew upwards. And when the hero landed, Ben, as if he were a hopped-up boy, began to jump from side to side at superhuman speed. Seeing the changes in the enemy's fighting style, the hero immediately realized what the issue was. Depending on the attachment of muscles to bones, you can divide them into white and red. Thinking about it, Han Sol began to pose to offset the damage from those attacks, and continued the thought. Red muscles play an important role in getting oxygen, so they contain a lot of myoglobin, which colors them red. Accordingly, they undergo fatigue much more slowly, but muscle contraction is also slower. However, white muscles fatigue much faster due to the lack of myoglobin, but muscle contraction is also much faster. This allowed Ben to achieve such speed that he even broke through the perfect hero pose. But he didn't give up and started posing even more powerfully. It's a battle of endurance. He would just have to wait until his opponent was exhausted. But Han Sol didn't know that Ben's body was not created by hard training, but by chemistry. And when they faced him head-on, Ben realized that he would definitely lose to this guy in brute force and began to avoid forcefulness of confrontation. The hero appreciated the freak's excellent muscle mass. But muscle control is also important in order to maximize his strength. Of course, with Ben's ever-growing body, he can't control his muscles completely. That's why Han Sol is waiting for this speedy guy to run out of steam. Friends Riper and Handart continued to fight the huge zombie. But the monster easily held off their onslaught and wasn't shy about calling the of your opponents as weaklings. Yes, the friends were well aware that they were weaker than a zombie. But that monster could never defeat the power of their masculine, strong, natural friendship. With those words, Riper lunged at the zombie, but immediately flew back a few meters after being hit. Hendart attacked from the back at this time, and with his battle energy, he delivered his most crushing blow. However, the strike was too slow, and the thunderbolt simply disappeared from under his strike. Hendart almost killed his friend, but he had enough strength to stop himself. Thank the gods he didn't kill him. The zombie was ready to slam them down with a single blow, but he was blown away by an incomprehensible lump of energy that flew at supersonic speed. It turned out to be Han Sol, who had been knocked back by Ben's blow. Without wasting a second, Han Sol ran back to his fight, leaving the swordsman behind alone with a dead zombie. Friends made the decision to join a ghouls group in town. At the same time, a messenger came running to a far-off village in the county where Rihanna was in exile. Messenger reported to the commander-in-chief that the county of Verdo had been attacked by an army of zombies, but the latter replied that the regular army is perfectly capable of dealing with zombies. That's true, but the problem is that the zombies are led by Ben. Hearing that name, Rihanna laughed. How could he be unlucky enough to attack now? After all, there are 2 shields in the county at the moment. It's Han Sol and her favorite niece Ryan, whose strength is on par with her beauty. The fight between the 2 girls continued with the use of various fighting techniques. Wiper's exercise, bird dog exercise. Ryan used the Late's fighting technique. Back in the old days, there was a never-ending war on the continent. The elves, one of the weakest races, were under constant oppression. Because of the lack of leaders and the elves' inability to play active sports, a human doctor named Cho Sokipilates invented and spread a new way to train elves. And in the current times, Lates has transcended sports and has become one of the martial arts of the Elves. And Rihanna's niece lived in the Elven forest and studied Lates Elvish. The training only lasted 7 years, and she was able to super-master this art. During the fight, Ryan soared into the air, but Elisa noticed that while in the air, she couldn't dodge the attack. And with a heartbreaking scream, Elisa lunged for Ryan. Rolling back, roll forward, another hit, but no success. At this time, Ryan, taking the dominant position, informed Eliza that she was no good as an opponent. Elisa tried to counterattack, but Ryan used a technique, circumduction, and went on the offensive. Elisa complimented Rihanna, saying that her method of combat was very similar to Rihanna's, but Ryan's skills are practically non-existent. The fight continued. Han Sol continued to take cover from Ben's attacks, even though Ben was supposed to be tired by now. But it wasn't happening. Ben yelled that he created the potion to be like Rihanna. But then Han Sol managed to neutralize one of Ben's punches. Ben, stunned, decided that the side effects of the chemotherapy had begun to show. Ben urgently needed to take a neutralizer. His body even began to change, and eventually Ben's body exploded and he turned back into a skinny man with yellow hands. Ben urgently needed an injection, so he asked Han Sol to stop fighting. Han Sol replied that he was against fights too, but it was Ben who started the fight. And by his actions, he has distracted my boys from training. Ben started apologizing, told that everything he'd done was just to save Elisa. Elisa, Han Sol interjected. Elisa died. Ben managed to get his hands on the syringe of potion again and started turning into a monster again. 32 years ago in the county of Verdo, Ben, who was 17 years old at the time, asked the Count why their men had so little mana. Count, who was also 17 at the time, practicing fencing exercises, said he wasn't interested in those details. Ben began to tell the Count that unlike combat energy, mana is only inherent in emotional people, and the people in the county are oppressed by strict discipline and punishment, and so mana can't circulate freely between people. But the Count interrupted him, informing him that the people of the county had enough combat energy and didn't need mana. Ben disagreed, and the Count suggested that he not think about his problems, but finally get to fencing lessons. Ben agreed, and they wrestled, during which the Count had 123 hits and Ben only 43. That's when Rihanna's mentor came to the practice field. She was surprised that Ben was not good at defending himself, for he is very intelligent and observant. But Ben replied that he was not interested in fencing. Rihanna laughed and suggested that it was because Ben had not yet reached perfection in this area, and gave the example of Weirdo, who is excited about every practice. But then the girl who came with Rihanna said that Ben has no talent, which caused the young men to be perplexed. Rihanna apologized and said she came because of this girl, but forgot to introduce her. This girl's name is Eliza, and she's a new sparring partner for practice bouts. Elisa laughed and suggested that the young men wouldn't be able to overpower her even if they attacked together. Naturally, the young men couldn't bear the humiliation and tried to attack them. However, Elisa quickly calmed their eagerness and knocked them out. The Count wondered about Elisa's beauty, but then Ben said that he had a dream of marrying Elise. The Count was very much surprised that their thoughts coincided, and they started making jokes about Ben being really bad with a sword. But Ben seriously said he's going to train hard. Indeed, their sparring began to look more and more like a contest of equal partners, and one day Ben got the better of the Count. Elisa noticed Ben's progress and asked Verdo if he would continue training. But the Count referred to the fact that he had business to attend to in the county and left in utter confusion. However, the Count's father was very displeased with his son. Verdo tried to justify that he had no talent for swordsmanship, but his father said he didn't want to hear about it. The upset future Count went to the fortress wall and sat there in the rain, pondering his future. Suddenly, someone approached him and advised him not to sit on the cold stones. Without turning around, the Count said it was all right and the man could go on, but suddenly that person was Elisa, who hugged him and asked him how he was okay with that look on his face. And after that, she offered to follow her. The Count wondered how this girl could smile all the time. One of the assumptions was that she'd rather be with Weirdo than Ben. The Count decided that he could love Elisa more than anyone else in the world. By chance, on the practice field, Weirdo overhears two students talking about how Ben proposed to Elisa, but she turned him down. The Count was very happy about this, and thought he had a great chance of winning Eliza over, and he raced to the girl's house. The guy confessed his love to her through the window, and said he was even ready to renounce the title of Count just to be near her. But hearing no answer, he glanced behind the curtains and saw a young couple kissing, and the young man was Ben! The following events took place the day before Elisa refused Ben's expression of affection. Ben convinces Elisa that because of her, Ben began to study fencing diligently, and began to achieve certain victories. Elisa lets Ben in on her secret. It turns out that since she was a kid, Elisa's been bending mana, and she needs to release some mana periodically to keep it from destroying her physical shell. Elise has to do it in secret so as not to violate the county's laws, and she wouldn't want to make someone she cared about an accomplice. But Ben wouldn't let her go. Elisa got angry and said if Ben didn't let her go, the magic would go into Ben's body. Ben replied that the only one in the county who understands mana is him, Ben. And Ben is the only one who can help Elisa solve this problem, and Ben confessed his love to Elisa. Count Verdo has no choice but to gnash his teeth. In a few days, Ben was walking with Elisa when he saw her faint. To the worried guy, the girl told him that such fainting happens from excess mana. Ben was very scared and decided to use chemistry to help solve Elisa's problem. He decided that he needed some time to solve this problem so that nothing can take away the person Ben loves. While Ben was working in the lab, Count Verdo was busy drinking. He couldn't forgive Elisa that the girl had chosen Ben. And one day, a drunken earl decided to find out. Elisa told him that he misinterpreted her words, and she never loved Verdo. Secondly, would the Count be a criminal if he knew that Elisa was using mana? The Count reported that he had not dared to rebel against his father before, but that he now. However, Verdo's courage was gone, and he began to hiccup with fear, and admitted that he's still scared. At that time, the county was experiencing a drought. It hadn't rained all summer, and the crops were dying. The peasants revolted and came to the Count demanding that he make it rain. The Count's father called his son over and told him to look closely at the people. A father tells his son that he's not a god and can't make it rain. Verdo inquired as to what should be done in such a situation. Father continued to argue that the masses needed someone to take responsibility for what was going on. But the old Count has a man who can be put in charge of keeping it from raining. The son asked, "Who is this man?" The Count's reply was discouraging. "It's Elisa." The old earl thanked his son for his help, for no come young man to his father and not tell him of his unhappy love, and that Elisa has a lot of mana. It would be hard on the county. And then there's the witch that's ready to go. Verdo shouted that it was wrong, but his father slapped him and said that the ruler of a country can't have any feelings. To forestall any action by his son, his father summoned the guards and ordered the young earl locked in a room. However, young Verdo escaped from the guard and ran to save a young girl from certain death. When the Count found Elisa, she was already being led under the arms of the guards. Elisa called out to Verdo in a desperate cry to help her, but the enraged peasants thought it was a good idea to execute the witch's assistant, even though he was a future earl, and the young earl fled. Bane arrived a little later and found his bride breathless. These days, the fight between Ben and Han Sol continued. Ben's body was transformed into that of a piranha, but Han Sol uses the one-handed bench press managed to capture Ben. Ben screamed, but he couldn't get free press again, and then a fist bump, and a new exercise called pullover, repeating 10 times in a triple set, and Ben didn't put up any more resistance. Han Sol was about to come to the aid of the ghoul builders, but he heard the growl of Ben's dog running away from him. At that time, using magic, Ben and his gang left the battlefield. The Count, who watched the battle from a safe place, resented Ben being allowed to leave. He shouted orders to Ryan that she needed to stop and destroy Ben. But suddenly, Ryan was out of control and screamed that the Count was finished, and rushed over to the Count. Ryan demanded to know what the Count did to her Auntie Riona. The Count demanded that the girl be stopped. The young swordsman began to carry out the Count's orders. But Ryan wasn't going to stop, and made a dizzying leap over the swordsman. Rumi stood in her way, but the Guardian was pushed back. Even further in Ryan's way was Blog. He too asked the girl to stop. But she praised Blog for being fit, and still managed to break free from Blog's grip. Finally, Ryan caught up with the fleeing Earl and wanted to get him killed. But the girl was grabbed by Han Sol's leg. Ryan tried to throw her sword at the Count, but Han Sol did the pullover exercise again in 10 sets, and Ryan lost consciousness. Han Sol was very upset that he had miscalculated the force and worried about whether the girl was alive. After a while, Ryan came to her senses, and to her surprise, she woke up in a cozy bed. Not a dungeon, The boy who was looking after her said that it was Mr. Han Sol who asked him to do this. Ryan immediately asked where Count Verdo was, though she realized that she would not be answered. But to her surprise, the boy said he would take her to the Count, and that Earl's in personal training right now. After a couple of minutes, Ryan doubted the guy's honesty, because he had taken her deep into the woods. Ryan thought about the fact that the boy had taken her deep into the woods on purpose, so she couldn't attack the Count again. But when she climbed the slope and saw Count Verdo, who was exhausted, begging to be killed, for Han Sol had harnessed him to a cart and was forcing him to drag himself. Noticing Ryan, Verdo immediately asked her to finish what she had started and finish him off. Hearing the Count's words, Han Sol became so excited that he even obtained a new skill, psychopathic coach. And Han Sol ordered Verdo to increase his efforts. The miserable coward began to beg for death with renewed vigor, and Ryan took great moral pleasure. After some time, the Count convened the High Council of the county. First item on the agenda is Ben's invasion, which killed the nobles and strong fighters of the county. The Council of Aristocrats summoned Rihanna from exile, but she refused to return, claiming more important matters. The aristocrats are wondering what Verdo intends to do with the vacant seats. The Count has proposed that Hendard and Reaper be awarded. Of course, the aristocrats unanimously agreed. Second item on the agenda. The townspeople who saw Han Sol's strength began to go to workouts and do bodybuilding. Consequently, a bodybuilder sword squad was created, and Mr. Gullybuilder became their temporary trainer. Verdo shouted that everyone was in agreement, and he's very happy that Mr. Han Sol has saved their townspeople. But Han Sol is not happy about something. The Count was surprised at that, because he did not want to offend the hero. But the hero silently knocked the chair out from under him. The guards immediately stood at the ready to attack, and Han Sol pointed with a menacing look at the gully builders who had been sitting without chairs the entire time. After realizing the reason, the Count immediately ordered the guards to lower their weapons, otherwise Mr. Han Sol might get even more angry. The Count began to do an exercise to develop his thigh muscles. Due to the new circumstances, the Count ordered the meeting to be held as soon as possible. The third point has to do with Ryan. She had attacked the head of state, but because of the kindness of the Count and the special situation in the country, the punishment would be mitigated. It was suggested that Rayan be stripped of her citizenship of Verdo County. Verdo interrupted the speaker and addressed the beautiful woman with a speech that if she wasn't happy with the council's decision, she could kill him. Ryan proudly refused the offer, but the Count will not rest. He demands to be tried because he has no right to be chief because he is not worthy to rule the country and is asking for someone to kill him and take his place. Of course, Han Sol thought that the Count wanted to give himself completely to the sport. The aristocrats rejoiced as well. If Verdo keeps the title of Earl, then that means one of them will take over. Han Sol realized that the Count would support the sport and offered to coach whoever would take the Count's place. Then the aristocrats immediately changed their minds and decided that they were happy with the current state of affairs. Verdo's legs were about to fall off, so he ordered him to move on to the next item. Then he promised Consol to make new simulators. But unfortunately, the county has no way to create such simulators. But King Begamus can help them, but no one knows how to find him. Ryan volunteered to help because she is a friend of spirits. While she lived with the pixie, she learned to communicate with ghosts. When Han Sol heard this, he immediately asked to be taken to this Begamus. The pretty girl wanted him to join her revenge in return, but the Count wants her to kill him anyway. Except Ryan isn't talking about his miserable life, but about a clan of black magicians called the Illuminati. That brought her family down. At the same time, Ben was chatting with two representatives of this clan. Ben started making excuses that he lost due to unforeseen circumstances, but he wouldn't make that mistake again. The two mages began to taunt the distressed man, saying that Eliza was lucky to die before Ben was dishonored. These words angered Ben, and he immediately lunged at those scumbags. At the same time, Rihanna found the meeting place of Ben and two members of a secret organization of magicians. The fight between Ben and the mages continued to gain momentum. The red-haired wench said she would destroy Eliza's body. Ben instantly lost control and injected more potion into his hand and unleashed his full power on the magicians. But when he removed his palm, he saw only their shadows, and the mages were already running away. The red-haired girl asked the Scarecrow how they could get their hands on Ben's research diary, since they were no longer cooperating. It didn't matter, though. The diary would go to them anyway. except that the mysterious voice said it didn't agree with it, and a powerful blast of battle energy struck the bastards. It was Riona, but despite her power, the mages somehow survived. Scarecrow attacked the swordswoman after a second of thought, but she ducked. Then the bastard used a new spell. Riona rushed to attack, deflecting the wizard's blow, and then chopped up Scarecrow's weapon like a normal tree branch. At this time, the expedition to the spirits was making its way through the forest. Verdo drew his blade and cut a path through the grass. Ryan asked not to cut the grass because the spirits don't like it. The Count parried that he was just clearing the way for Han Sol-san, but the hero told him not to worry about it, but rather to go behind in striding lunges. After Han resolved the conflict, he noticed that they were going in circles. Ryan said that this is true, but the way of spirits is different from that of humans, and now they'd just found the perfect spot, so the hottie started using the late's breath. Ryan released her own mind, feeling the forest wind with every cell of her body. Ryan could hear the birds chirping, the rustling of leaves, the trembling of a flower ready to bloom. And finally, she discovered a path of spirits that she could reach with her hand. At that moment, Han Sol was training Gullies in Verdo A without paying attention to Ryan until the pretty girl dragged him into the ghost world. Then everyone else joined them too, and they saw the beautiful world of Gaio. But as soon as they began to enjoy this beauty, as they were immediately nailed to the ground, ghoulie builders' bodies became incredibly heavy. Han Sol noticed it too, and immediately started crouching down. As the guys started to get used to the increased gravity, they were immediately surrounded by giant metal golems. One of them unleashed its full power on Han Sol. Of course, our hero had no trouble holding back the giant's fist. Then the other golems also pounced on the hero, pushing his body halfway into the ground. Then Han Sol shouted, screamed with this incredible pleasure, gradually increasing the load. Realizing that nothing was working, all the giants immediately jumped on their enemy, hoping his body wouldn't hold up. But after a second, the whole place started to shake. Blog immediately realized that it was the call of his mentor's muscles and asked everyone to find shelter. And Han Sol, which had grown to a ginormous size, ordered the old lord to increase his weight. The gully no doubt obeyed the order, and the hero began to squat with weights using the golem as projectiles. Ryan immediately inquired as to what was even going on with our hero. Blog explained to her that today was his mentor's leg day. It only trains the lower body. But from this dialogue they were distracted by a menacing voice, which resounded throughout the island and informed them that he was the spirit Begimos, and this was his domain. By this point, Han Sol had already finished his approach, and ignoring the voice, he just went to the water where he started washing and drinking, and it wasn't seawater. Water helps restore fluid loss and build muscle. Begimos was indignant and angrily asked why the athletes had come. After drinking the water, Han Sol was finally ready to talk. However, now Begimos himself was unwilling to talk to such ignoramuses, and decided to teach them a lesson with the help of a maze that suddenly appeared around our heroes. Without the help of spirits, it is impossible to find the way out of the labyrinth, and on the way we'll meet iron giants that will try to kill everything in their path, and to talk to Begimos, the heroes will have to reach him. Ryan, without hesitation, decided to just jump into the maze, but as soon as she soared into the air, the spirit increased gravity and pinned the beauty to the ground. She immediately started thinking of other ways to pass the trials, but she heard the gully builders start just pushing the walls. Begimos immediately laughed, and asked about the fact that did the athletes really think they would break down these powerful walls with their bare hands? However, Han Sol, as always, just made a hole in this insurmountable barrier. The block also had a hand in it. The gully builders began to break through the walls as well, but one question remained. What would they do with the golems? Ryan will help them with this. She instantly flew up to the giant's eye and stabbed it with her sword, because the golem's weak point is the core in the center of the head. Upon hearing this, the gullibles immediately swooped down on the giants. These barbarians so infuriated Begimos that he almost blew up the volcano, but the heroes still reached his abode. However, to get into it, you had to pass another test and lift a huge iron lid. Khan was about to break the iron, but Ghoulie Builder drew his attention to the fact that there was a rope tied to it, and that rope goes through the poly screws. When Han Sol ran his gaze to where the rope led, his eyes filled with tears. He had been in this world for 11 months, and for the first time in that long time, he saw a real training machine. It is an upper block pull. Thanks to it, you can perform exercises efficiently and safely. Also, there are several types and designs of this beautiful exercise machine. A teary-eyed Khan Sol told the Gillies the name of the machine, and Verdo thought it was some kind of trap. But the hero reassured everyone and asked the bodybuilders to name all the back exercises they did. The bodybuilders answered that these were the following exercises: one-handed dumbbell work, pull-ups, and deadlifts. Athletes helped each other when learning to do pull-ups, but not all people have training partners, and that's what the upper block pull was designed for. The movement is very similar to a pull-up, but you can choose the weight you want, so this machine is suitable for beginners who need a smaller weight than their own, as well as for experienced athletes who want to pull up with more weight safely. These exercises target the oblique and scapular muscles of the back, but if you lose concentration, you can injure your forearms and shoulders. But since they have an exercise machine, Han Sol will now show you how to do the exercises properly. To start, he adjusted the trainer to his height. The grip distance should be slightly greater than shoulder width. Then you need to channel the force into your core and try to lift yourself up with your oblique back muscles, not your arms. The gaze at this point should be directed perpendicular to the pipe. Ensure that the back does not deviate too far so that the body weight is not used for traction. Well, since this weight is too heavy for beginners, Han Sol told them to go ahead and he would practice for now. Almost without straining, the hero opened the lid of the giant hatch, and everyone immediately climbed inside, but the Count did not understand, and how Mr. Han Sol would join them. Oh, that. Once the hero has made 4 approaches, he ordered the Lord to reduce the weight of the lid, and the Gullah builders held the pass for Han Sol, and then he climbed in safely. Inside, they saw hamsters operating the most complex mechanisms for melting and molding metals. It was a whole hamster-powered factory. Ryan marveled at the sight of these cute animals and wanted to iron them all. But Han Sol told her not to touch anything, because she needed to talk to the plant manager first. At this moment, an unknown voice agreed with Han Sol. It was a fat dog who introduced himself as Begimos. Virdo and the old lord were surprised that Begimos was so fat and small. The dog immediately started yelling at these ignoramuses of the middle world, but that's when he got hit in the head by a big cat. She told me that this dog's name was Rena, and that Begimos was actually her, and all the workers here are the supreme spirits of the earth, so they can't be treated like ordinary animals. Begimos asked the heroes what brought them here. Han Sol immediately asked if she could create simulators. The cat replied that she only needed time and materials to do so. The hero was about to get excited and ask her to do what he wanted, but he was interrupted by Virdo and told that this was not the way to do business. He instantly displayed all his diplomatic and etiquette skills, and asked what price Begimos should be offered for the trainers. The cat was surprised at the Count's politeness, but spirits don't need money or material goods, so instead, as payment, she wants some favor. Begimos said the following: "Recently there has been a loon polluting the earth. Everyone Begimos sent to him has gone missing. If the guests get rid of him and clear the land, the cat will make 1,000,000 simulators for them." In response, Virdo asked for a guide, and she provided Ren for that purpose. Ren tried to deny it and say he had a lot of work to do, but the cat got angry and sent the Renee with the expedition. Meanwhile, Rihanna had already dealt with the Scarecrow and began her battle with the junior magicians. The senior mages ordered the swordswoman Rihanna to be captured, but her combat abilities were enough to deal with the attackers using her combat energy. That was hitting everything around it. Rihanna was able to gain the upper hand on the battlefield. Han Sol, along with his comrades, watched Remy eat rocks because eating a piece of ore. He can read the memories of the earth. Except he won't get much knowledge from these young stones, however they're very tasty. Still, Doggy asked to find older rocks for him to pick up the trail. The Gullah builders immediately went in search of and of course, Han Sol turned it all into a one-handed pulling workout. At this time, Remy ate another rock, who told him the story of the Toadman Croc, who was forced to join Oculus and lead the fighting order of the Red Men. Remy said he found something, but the athletes were busy practicing and didn't pay attention to the doggy. Blog was walking through the woods and reminiscing about his run-in with Ryan. Han Sol once told him he needed to strengthen the auxiliary muscles. And then, Blog found a slug. Bouncing Blog tried to catch a slug to make it into an exercise band, but someone beat him to it. It was Croc who reported that slug makes great alcohol. Blog tried to explain that you can get stronger with slugging. Croc was pleased with Blog's wish and said that their clan head was a pro at it and asked Blog to follow him. Blog was embarrassed but went. Blog has been poured a drink and he became intoxicated very quickly, expecting alcohol to make him stronger, but the Toad Man kept pouring and pouring. Finally, a very intoxicated Blog said he couldn't take it anymore. And then the Toad Man said that the drink would cost a lot. A few hours later, Blog came to himself. I was very thirsty and had a terrible headache. It turned out that Blog is strongly connected, and where he is, the guy did not know, then heard someone's voice, which advised not to move too much. It was the commander of the humans. Lizard from Ali's mines. He said they were in a warehouse of toad food called toad poison, and they were going to die. To Blog's question about why they weren't killed right away, the lizard commander replied that they are necessary for the dungeon to work. The dungeon is a place where monsters endlessly appear. In reality, you can't produce monsters all the time. Monsters require the energy of living things to create, so the dungeon needs to create a core that stores energy. For this purpose, the amphibians fill their warehouses with living creatures that turn into energy and become part of the dungeon. Blog asked if there was a way to get out of here but got a negative response, and the advice is to move less because he's losing energy and his life with it. An upset Blog aloud apologized to Han Sol for his unreasonable behavior. The lizard became very animated after hearing his mentor's name. Blog asked how the lizard man knows Han Sol. But the commander did not answer, but decided to get out of this place by all means. He began to shout and try to get out of his bonds. At this time, Han Sol couldn't figure out where Blog had disappeared to. After doing a little investigating, Han Sol realized that Blog went slug hunting. Teacher was surprised by his student's behavior, but even more surprised by its absence. After such a long time, however, our hero was confident that the Blog would get out of any situation. The Count disapproved of Han Sol's calmness, claiming that the squad was in enemy territory. But Han Sol was not reluctant. He only suggested that the Count do 100 squats. The Count began to do the exercises. Renee showed up and said they were targeting a toad man named Cork, who builds a dungeon in the area and harnesses the energy of living beings. Han Sol took an interest in the frogman. Frog legs are rumored to be high in protein for muscle growth. The gullies got excited and began to ask Remy where the frogman was. Remy replied that they needed to find a cave where Croc could be. Gillibuilders suggested splitting into groups and signaling when they find something. Han Sol was thinking Earl offered his services as a search specialist mentor. Asked Earl if he could do 100 squats. No, Earl replied, and Han Sol advised him to finish his training and then go searching for the dungeon. The frogman returned to the dungeon. He was carrying a large sack. Rubbing his paws happily, the Toadman said about how he would make a lot of friends and it would help the dungeon grow a lot. There was a noise in the dungeon and giant caterpillars appeared. The lizard commander said they were messengers of death. At dinner, the gullies noticed that Blog had gone without food, but the teacher was not worried, assuring everyone that Blog was born under a lucky star. His advantage was that Blog was very indiscriminate about food, and he doesn't care what he eats just to get the energy you need. Blog managed to eat one of the caterpillars, and a burst of energy after eating it allowed him to break free from the bonds that bound him. But Blog was hungry and was about to eat some more caterpillars. A group of gully builders led by the Old Lord moved quickly through the forest. Gully were finding out what a dungeon was, and the Old Lord was eager to tell them about it. It's a place of energy accumulation, and by owning this place, you can gradually expand your territory of influence. One of the fighters asked why people don't create dungeons. The Count told him that he had no idea how much energy it took to create a dungeon. People are already tired of being taxed, and if they are also ordered to give away their life energy, the people may revolt. It takes a lot of people, and it is not easy to conserve energy. Gully noticed that the location for the dungeon is very disgusting. Remy replied that the answer was obvious. First of all, this area is restricted to outsiders, and secondly, there may be another purpose other than creating a dungeon. But in any case, the process of creating a dungeon is very costly, and it is very difficult to understand how a human toad is going to do it. The process of inviting victims was worked out to the smallest detail. At the beginning, alcohol poured in rivers. Alcohol made a lot of new friends, which the recruiters were quick to take advantage of. They offered a heavily drunk client to sign a contract, and if the client was still hesitant, they would increase the alcohol dose, and in the morning the customers were being driven to the liquor factory, and the customers were demanding more booze. But the guards were watching them, and drove the workers to work to extract ingredients by chance. At that moment the human toads saw Hans Sol, who showed them how to work with a shovel. The mighty man was very interested in the human toads. They admired his muscles and tried to find out if they were his friends. But Hans Sol did not understand their hints, and suggested to make a few more approaches work, with a shovel gives even more results than dumbbells. The toads resented why they had to obey Hans Sol. But he didn't react, just made a remark about taking care of the sports equipment. And again he gave the toads shovels and commanded them to begin the exercise. The man-toads were very upset. They were hoping to get Hans Sol drunk and said he wasn't their friend, which upset the athlete, who was surprised because they were training buddies. The man-toads shouted that Hans Sol was not their friend and tried to hit the athlete with a shovel. But the shovel broke on Hans Sol, which again caused disappointment for the Quarks. They wondered how such an insignificant person could withstand their attack. Hans Sol was furious, and grabbing the frogs' tongues, and pulled on them like a rubber band. The toads begged for mercy and apologized for their words. In the dungeon, Blog remembered his mentor, who asked Blog, once he had finished the exercise, what embarrassed the young man, and suggested we work on the muscles. Blog was worried about his poor exercise technique. Hans Sol suggested that Blog raise his hand, which the young man did. The preceptor asked what the student was feeling, who replied that he had an unpleasant sensation. And that's when the coach said Blog doesn't use the cog muscles, which work when the person raises the arm, but with improper technique, the work of these muscles is done by other muscles, and began to explain to the young man how to train them. The exercise with the rubber band involves stretching the arms forward and working your shoulder blades to overcome the tension of the expander. Then arch your back, pushing your shoulders back. And so perform 3 approaches of 15 reps each day, and gradually progress will come. All these memories flashed in the imagination of Blog, who prepared to fend off the dungeon guard's attack. The guard tried to cheer himself up with alcohol and rushed over to Blog. Blog quietly decided that the exercise he was doing to strengthen the cog muscles helped him make a powerful rock throw that hit the guard in the forehead, and using his strength, the young man grabbed the guard by the head and pushed him out. At the same time, the human lizard commander found the energy core of the dungeon and got very excited, deciding to become the owner of the dungeon, but was suddenly attacked by a black magician who was also very happy about his conquest of the human lizard, and decided to get away from the place as soon as possible. After a while, Ben met up with Rihanna, who thanked Rihanna for her assistance and reported that, thanks to Rihanna's intervention, he had succeeded, but he was most excited that Ben had resurrected Elise. This message really surprised Rihanna. She asked Ben if he really thought it was Elise. Ben said it didn't matter. Rihanna decided it was necessary to sort things out. Rihanna told Ben that so many people were hurt because of his revenge. Ben started to make excuses for being left with nothing, and what's happening isn't all his fault, but part of the blame lies with Rihanna as his teacher, and tried to attack Rihanna, but to no avail. Rihanna agreed that she should have stopped Ben the day Eliza died. Ben continued to insist and aggressively attacked Rihanna. Suddenly Eliza stopped them and wondered why they were going to fight, because people should be able to dialogue. Eliza asked Ben why he was being rude to the teacher, and also asked Rihanna if she was really raising other students with a real sword. Rihanna asked Ben why Elise was saying that. Ben suggested that Eliza's memories hadn't come back. Rihanna agreed with the student and grabbed Eliza by the throat and said she was only dealing with a shell of Eliza's past because it was a spawn of the dungeon. Eliza begged for mercy and rescue. Rihanna reported that if things were left as they were, it would be a disaster. Ben screamed for the teacher to forgive him and asked me to kill him instead of Elise. Ben didn't understand why everyone kept wanting to kill Eliza. The chemist shouted that in all cases, he and only he was to blame and he was willing to be punished and die. Rihanna tried to reason with Ben and explain that he believed the dungeon chimeras, but Ben managed to get a syringe of poison and stabbed it into Rihanna's shoulder. The swordswoman passed out. Hans Sol, after a lengthy conversation with the human toads, managed to establish a relationship with Quack and come to the conclusion that alcohol is harmful, and sport is essential to all living things, and they parted as friends. The old lord said we should return to the alley mine. Han Sol recommended that they remember to do their daily exercise, and they set off on their return journey. Unfortunately, Begimos thanked the guys for their work and informed them that they could not fulfill the task of creating simulators because they did not have the material. That confession made Han Sol lose his temper. But it's possible to find material and make simulators. It's not just material, it's a certain metal. That can only be found in the new emerging dungeons. There's a dungeon near this mine, but it can be very dangerous, so Begimos sends Remy with him again. And then Count Verdo asked for the floor. The Count asked for some armor to give him, so he would be in less danger, and Begimos took them to the armory where they suddenly saw a pink dumbbell. Graf asked to look at the dumbbell in surprise, and noticed that the dumbbell was very light. Ryan also confirmed the very light weight of the dumbbell. Han Sol approached the dumbbell and tried to pick her up, but he didn't make it. His childhood memories surfaced in his mind when Han Sol asked his coach why the coach always ended the workout with pink dumbbells. The coach then asked the boy about the meaning of bodybuilding. The boy thought that bodybuilding gives you strength, big muscles, and good skin. The coach said he thought differently. In a trainer's mind, bodybuilding is the training that makes it possible to the athlete will be able to lift any weight without restrictions. But in the present tense, Han Sol could not get the small dumbbell off the ground. Begimos smiled at her thoughts and said excitedly that she finally found the child Kang Dong-jun was talking about. Han Sol confirmed that Kang Dong-jun was his teacher on Earth, and Begimos said the teacher was her co-worker, and he talked about saving the world. A long time ago, the coach left this dumbbell with the words that someday there will be a child who can't lift this dumbbell. Which really puzzled Begimos, who didn't understand why she was looking for a kid who couldn't lift a dumbbell. Kang Dong-jun said that someone who can lift light weights like a heavy weight can change this rotten world. Also, the coach said he knew one of the guys who could do it. Begimos wondered if the coach had any students. Kang Dong-jun asked Begimos not to tell his student anything or admit that they knew each other. Begimos asked the coach if he was going back to Earth. The coach evasively replied that he had to go to another place called space. Noticing Han Sol, who was still trying to lift the dumbbell off the ground, she shouted at him that Han Sol should surpass his teacher. Han Sol was able to do it with incredible effort. After a jerk, he let go of the dumbbell and fell backwards. The dumbbell fell to the ground with a thud. Count Verdo surprisingly lifted the dumbbell without any effort. Han Sol woke up and tried to ask Begimos where his teacher had gone, but she didn't get a clear answer. Begimos assumed that Kang Dong-jun is practicing somewhere. The athlete asked if there were any other things or objects left from his teacher. Begimos hesitated and took him to some room and warned that it could be dangerous in here. The Count asked Han Sol thoughtfully what the next steps would be. Han Sol suggested some practice. Part of the expedition, led by the Old Lord and the blog, returned to the Ghoulies' village, causing great excitement and joy in the village. The Old Lord asked the village elder to recount the incidents during their absence. The elder began his tale of when Cockatrice disappeared and Han Sol left, there was a power struggle. And for a while the Ghoulies maintained law and order. But the orcs came and changed everything. The elder replied that the orcs could not defeat them until the Lord of the Orcs appeared. This message made the Old Lord very excited, and he asked to know where the orcs came from. The elder said that the orc tribe was called the Tribe of the Red Palm. The Old Lord was flooded with memories. When he was born, it was clear that the future Lord was a special child because he had magical powers. When the Lord grew up, one day he threw a stone far into the woods, and a wild boar came out of the woods and got hit by the stone. The Lord thought he was lost, but then someone managed to stop the wild boar with a powerful blow. The man who rescued the Lord asked if the Lord had magical powers and introduced himself. It turned out that he was an orc from the Red Palm tribe who had magical powers and offered his friendship. Then the orc saluted the Lord in a peculiar way, and the orc instilled fear in the young gully, so he tried to avoid orcs. There was a loud trumpet blast. The village elder said that this signals an enemy attack. The Old Lord said that today they must get rid of the past. The orcs were advancing in battle lines, holding clubs in their hands. The Lord of Orcs gave orders to recruit slaves for the tribe and destroy the rest of the creatures. Suddenly, large stones began to fall from the sky on the hordes of orcs, and the orc army stopped in panic. The Lord of Orcs didn't realize what was happening on the battlefield. The old Lord Gilly commanded his warriors to go, and Gilly and Blog rushed at the aliens, the surprise attack on the orcs giving them a chance to win. And the old lord himself decided to deal with his old savior by using magic to stop the sword of the Lord of Orcs. Orc also remembered how he had saved Gully, and realized who Gully's squad leader was. The Lord of Orcs proclaimed that the enemy leader must be destroyed, and then the battle would be over. In a wild leap, he attempted to strike the old lord. In his path arose Blog, who did a one-handed dumbbell bench press, much to the orcs' surprise. The head of the orcs said he knew someone had united the Gullies and that someone was Blog. Blog responded to the blowback and said that he is not the leader of the Gullies, but a disciple of Han Sol, the master of the Gullies, and the leader of the Gullies is Gurod. Orc remembered who Gurod was. He excitedly said that they had finally met, and did Gurod remember their greeting? Han Sol, together with the Count and Reyna, were doing back pull-ups. Han Sol offered to do another 100 pull-ups and finish the workout. The Count grumbled as usual. He said resentfully that only the old lord didn't train. But he was respected by everyone. This surprised Han Sol very much. Han Sol began to tell me that every living being has its own level of exertion. And what for Han Sol is just a warm-up before training, for someone else is a full-fledged workout. The old lord is gradually receiving an increased but not highly noticeable workload, and gradually his body is getting in order, and the old lord is slowly becoming very strong, and Gurod's actions in the village are clear proof of that. The old lord intercepted the orc's hand. He reported that Gurod was no longer the weakling the orc had laughed at, and was able to use magic to bring a piece of rock down on the orc's head.